racing. This is real racing. This is action. This is real action. Now the real 3DO player is here. Only from Panasonic. An interactive multiplayer that's up to 50 times more powerful than ordinary systems. So get real. The 3DO interactive multiplayer. Only from Panasonic.
One of the hottest new CD applications here at CES was 3DO, the acronym for three-dimensional optics. Trip Hawkins, who founded Electronic Arts, has put together an alliance between his own company and consumer electronics giant Matsushita, communications giant AT&T, and the world's largest vendor of entertainment software, Time Warner. The result is a new standard for interactive multimedia.
We really look forward to the final emergence of what I've talked about for a long time, which is the new Hollywood, the merging of Silicon Valley and traditional Hollywood, which you see represented on stage here today.
With our filmmakers and television producers, and in fact people and talent in the music business, we find it possible for us to tell our stories, to develop our drama, to develop our characters, because of the graphics power. It's not just the numbers, and it's not just all of these boxes and what they contain. It really represents a very meaningful watershed for an entire software industry. That is the software industry in Hollywood.
When we saw potential of technology at 3DO, we are very encouraged to make a significant investment in 3DO.
3DO can process images 50 times faster than a PC or a video game console, thanks to custom animation processors which run in parallel. The system can process up to 64 million pixels per second. In addition to the graphics chips, the 3DO system also includes a custom digital processor for audio, a specialized video processor, and a 32-bit RISC processor for program control. The system also uses a double-speed CD-ROM drive for fast access. The net result is a lot of computing power that gives you smoother images, cleaner scaling, and texture mapping. 3DO calls it cinematic software.
You'll see a new kind of interactivity. For example, there'll be movies that are done as a linear stream just like they are now. It's a storyline that has a set beginning and a set end. But now you'll begin to see what are called interactive pictures. These are stories where the storyline can change, or the perspective on how you view that particular story can change. And it'll be a new form of media, just like in the beginning of motion pictures.
Hello. Let's see. It's been a while since I streamed, so welcome. Been working on mergerfs stuff more so than 3DO stuff lately, so I figured, let's see, make sure the mic is all right. Why not stream some? So I did some new documentation. Is what I spent my winter vacation time working on. So mergerfs now has this nice MK docs based documentation system. I guess when you zoom in, it cuts off the side, but it's hopefully a lot easier to navigate, and I didn't just transfer everything. I actually significantly rewrote a lot of it, brought some of it up to date and whatnot. And I learned this morning that apparently, so some time ago, I had kind of killed FreeBSD support, not really purposefully, but the fact that most people use Linux, and I did not get, I just didn't have anyone saying anything about using it on FreeBSD. And there's some technical challenges on FreeBSD, because one of the core features I take advantage of on Linux is the fact that threads can have their own credentials. And this this leads to a lot of flexibility. Samba does this, and I'm sure some other applications do this. They take advantage of the fact that as typically in Unix, if any thread changes the credentials, calls like set EUID, then the whole process changes. But in Linux, that's actually done behind the covers via glib or whatever, so whatever the libc is. And so the fact that FreeBSD is well, at least the last time I checked, had no way of creating per thread credentials meant that I had to keep a lock anytime that the process needed to change credentials, because I had to keep the credentials the same over the course of some function. And that really harms performance. So between that, like not having a good solution without potentially completely rewriting the whole product to be multi-process, and which, you know, it's still not out of the question, but it would be a massive overhaul. Between that fact and no one seemingly cared, I just left it broken. But it turns out that that is not the case. That I look at mergerfs FreeBSD, turns out that when was this? Looks like I probably commented on this thread at some point. Oh, 6 years ago. Yes, I did. I guess let's try Google. I guess it doesn't show up well. FreeBSD mergerfs. They have their ports. Huh, I guess it just isn't. Oh, here we go. Third in line is not too bad. So they did. This individual apparently made some patches to get it to work. So the plan today is to take those patches and get them upstreamed. And then I've been working kind of generically on, or like on miscellaneous mergerfs things recently. So I think this is in that vein, and I'll probably continue to do that a bit. But let's look at these patches. So they're not that big. Let's see. Go to source. I guess we just do one at a time. Terminal. Check out FreeBSD. So we've got, okay, some CPU stuff, that makes sense. libfuse, fuser mount, read ahead. Yeah, these are all kinds of things that are unsurprisingly incompatible. Oh, I should probably, problem is I need a good way to test this. Maybe like FreeBSD.org. I probably need to put this in a virtual machine. What does it say they support? This is for maybe it's just in general. I guess it doesn't say if it's for a specific FreeBSD release. So let's do a virtual. Okay, they've got a VM, AMD 64. ZFS, maybe raw, PhD, QCal, maybe this guy. Let's big is this? That's not too big. All right, let's go to temp, FreeBSD, XD. See if we can get this running in QEMU. How big is this? Make sure I have enough space on this machine. 43 gigs, that should be plenty. Oh, I used to also have, where is it? Yeah, this used to have a FreeBSD thing, so I can probably put that up back, but I'll have to look it up how to do that. How big is this? Okay, get the image and then okay, here we go. Can we do QEMU? Oh, what the hell's the instructions? Let's see. I have 3DO image cat start QEMU. QM system D. Can I handle just 1 gig of memory? Right drive file equals. Should probably be able to figure it out. Device user. I don't remember how to set up the network correctly. Let's just see if this works. That's a good start. Boot multi-user mode. Jeez, I haven't used FreeBSD in a very long time. Just need to fit. Set networking. I don't know what the defaults are for QEMU. That looks like it got an IP address, so that's something. Oh, well, what's the damn password? Oh, I guess there isn't one. That's good. Is Git available? No. Create the package. Yes. Is this working? Yes. Okay, networking clearly works. All right, so package install mergerfs. Does this work? I don't know if I gave it enough RAM. Let's see. How much RAM do I have free on this machine? Not as much as I would like. What the hell's using up so much RAM? Let's see. QEMU. That doesn't seem right. That's probably Brave. And OBS. and more Brave and Discord. I've got 32 gigs of RAM on this machine, and I've got 22 gigs used. Sad. Oops. Don't want to have the mouse go in there. Let's see. Can I turn off that? Detach. Grab input. Grab on hover. I don't know. All right, well, whatever. We'll let that do its thing. And then oh, wait a minute. No packages for installing matching mergerfs. Okay. Let's do git. Yep. At least we can get the code, confirm when things function. Hello, how do you, let's see, Fool Snabel? Yeah, I'm terrible with usernames. So I don't know if you're familiar with some of my open source projects, but one of them is called mergerfs. It's a union file system, and I've kind of been derelict in supporting FreeBSD over the past, I don't know, year plus, after I added some features that were very Linux focused, and it turns out that someone on the FreeBSD side actually made some patches that I'm going to try to upstream and make the file system usable on FreeBSD again. I didn't even know anyone was bothering to use it, so yeah, there's some other stuff that I've been looking at on the project, just new enhancements and changes that I've had planned for a while, but I'd focused on 3DO development for a while. I also maintain 3dodev.com, so the old 3DO game console from the mid-90s. I am kind of the one-stop shop for all things related to the platform and homebrew, and so I've been working on this dev kit, 3DO dev kit, for the past, I don't know, a few months, kind of off and on. And we've got a number of projects going on using it, and it's kind of pretty stable and easy to use, in my opinion, at the moment. So my kind of interests have shifted back to my main project of mergerfs. So just yeah, trying to start the new year with some fresh development on mergerfs, because there's some major things, like in a, what was it, April, May, June, maybe June time frame, there was
T2st just raided with 59 viewers.
Hello T2, thank you for rating. Yeah, I decided to do some streaming, so it dropped out of your stream earlier, but welcome everyone.
And just followed.
It's just to repeat, since we've got all these new people in the chat, I've for about a decade, actually no, almost 11 years now, I've got this project mergerfs. For those who are in the T2 channel, T2 includes mergerfs, as do a number of other distros. Actually, let's see, I recently created new documentation, so I like showing it off, but
X_coding just followed.
There's a bunch of projects that leverage this software. Let's see, project comparisons, related projects. Here we go. So the emulation frame distro Laka TV uses my software, which is somewhat ironic because I also maintain the Opera 3DO emulator. It's in Open Media Vault, COS/OS, ZimaOS, Cosmos OS. I'm hoping to maybe get it into TrueNAS. There's people asking for it in TrueNAS. And then it's used with a bunch of other software as well. People with Unraid and people combine it with ZFS and rclone and all kinds of stuff. So, oh yeah, I do include T2 here. And I haven't supported FreeBSD in a while because of kind of focusing on Linux, which is where most of my users are leveraging the software. And so I found out earlier today that, in fact, someone went and patched mergerfs to get it to work on FreeBSD again, and I'm just trying to grab these patches, which turned out to be pretty small, and bring them upstream so they don't have to do that anymore. I was also working on some other stuff, trying to see if I could improve the performance of directory reading. So one of the things that mergerfs does, if you're familiar with Plan 9, Plan 9 has this feature called binding, where thank you. Oh, and thank you for all the follows that have come in.
Followed.
There was many of those, and I was in the middle of talking. But thank you to everyone who's been following. Plan 9 has this feature called binding when you mount, and so you can actually take any arbitrary directory and bind them together into like a union file system. Thank you,
the passive type
Dean
probably
Hertz,
plays
for the follow.
Nintendo.
Dean Hertz just followed.
So there is the way Plan 9 works is when you bind a number of directories together. If you have two directories, foo and bar, and they both have the file ls in it, or abc, and when you do an ls to list the directory, you'll see that there's actually two files called a in them. Now, most union file systems do not work that way, and mergerfs does not work that way. And so you need to do deduplication of file names. And this may sound simple, but when you're talking about a directory that could have tens of thousands of entries, not only is the cost of, and you could have, I mean, I've seen people who have setups where they've merged together or created a pool of hundreds, more than 100 terabytes, and you're talking sometimes dozens of file systems combined together. So some of these can have tens of thousands or more files, and so you need to, when you do an ls, you effectively are doing a get dents or read dir across each one of these paths that you've included in the pool. And so it's expensive enough to get these readers to hit each of these paths, and I provide some optimizations or concurrency and parallelness to try to improve that, especially if you're working with network file systems where the latency is really high, or if you've got hard drives that are asleep. You don't want to just sequentially go one at a time. You want to wake them all up at the same time, and then hopefully by the time you get done reading the first file system on the drive A, drive Z is already woken up, and so you're not waiting the sequential time. But in any case, there can be a good improvement there if you make the deduplication of the names faster. Also, it has an impact on CPU utilization, of course. And so I was looking at data structures, sets that have low insert and check costs. And if you look at something like, what's this, a vers table is the C, pretty a quite performant hash map implementation in C. He has this table down here of all these different hash types in C and C++ particularly, and then kind of relative performance metrics. And so I was using khash before, which gets pretty good responses. The thing is, this is not exactly representative of what I want to do. So for instance, this is like a 64-bit integer key, but a 448-bit value for inserting when it doesn't already exist. And so you can see its performance is pretty good, though the STC and dict, the mlibs dict is kind of the baseline here. Whereas in my case, I basically have the key and the value be the same value, right? Because it's a set. So I really need to do some micro benchmarking here, but it might be that khash was kind of a good starting point, but it looks like this mlibs dict might be better. So I was playing with that earlier, but then when the FreeBSD thing came up, that's why I've kind of pivoted. So anyway, I just downloaded the VM for FreeBSD so we can do some testing. I just installed Git, and so I should be able to git clone github.com trap exit mergerfs. And this way we'll be able to test any of the patches I make in the virtual machine. And then later I'll add it to my Cirrus build process on GitHub. But for now, let's I guess we'll just go one by one. libcpu. All right, so mergerfs as a file system, you might not, well, because it's a userland file system, there's certain things that I have to concern myself with practically that maybe you wouldn't expect. So for instance, the reason that, let's see, this is CPU, right? So, wait, what? It's in libfuse. So I embedded libfuse a while back. And this is libcpu. Right. So there are certain things that I needed to take care of to help improve in performance, especially when you're talking about like NUMA systems. So Fuse doesn't have good awareness of memory layout. In fact, I don't think there's any at the moment. And what that means is if you're running on a system, especially that has NUMA, but even some of the more NUMA-like setups where I think earlier AMD Ryzen systems, right, you could use NUMA because they had different, the CCDs would try to target different sections of memory and whatnot. One of the things that came up as a problem is if you allowed all the threads of mergerfs to just float and be scheduled by the OS normally, then there was a lot of probably cache churning and NUMA unawareness, and as a result, the performance would be harmed because you've got these buffers. Let's say you're reading and writing a file, then that information may come from one part of memory and it's not efficient, such that, or it's not efficiently dispatching the request to a thread that happens to have already been like related to that memory or something. And so it's kind of the worst case scenario. And by pinning threads, that can help. And so I need to do like setting of affinity, and well, that is different on different operating systems. So FreeBSD clearly does not have these particular behaviors. And so it looks like here they're just defining them as nothing. I wonder though, let's FreeBSD. Let's see, maybe they do have, I mean, this might be the easiest thing to get going, but, oh, so they do have scheduling affinity, it looks like. Oh, but you have to include GNU. I mean, this says FreeBSD, so do you have to just include GNU source, which I already do? Interesting. Okay, well, let's go back to the emulator or the virtual machine and let's just, I need gmake. Right. Package install gmake. Like I said, it's been a long time since I've messed with BSDs. Yes. That's good enough. Okay, yeah. Doesn't have malloc trim. That was another issue that I ran into early on with mergerfs, is that it just did so much churning of memory in libfuse that it got really bad fragmentation, memory fragmentation over time. And you're talking about running this on a server that could be up for months. In fact, I think I had a server running 24/7 with the file system being actively used by networking software for over a year. And so, you don't want your file system to be having fragmented memory. Syscall, what's this? Seems like a BSD thing. I'm impressed though that there's so few patches. But let's maybe just do this first. So if, what did you do? Okay. It's all right. So that's simple enough. So if def FreeBSD, it's just, yeah, okay. Else, and then in this, they just okay, that's easy enough for this one. And then let's libfuse if define Linux else. So why this suggests that my setup is not creating the config file properly, because this should let's see, cat source config.h, let's see, tools, oh, that's the wrong directory, build tools, we do, oh, it's been so long since I worked. Let's see. Let's look at the make file. Big. Where the hell do I run? Preload, build, version, config file. Okay, build, and then this views, objects. Let's just see if I can catch it again. Or did I get rid of it? It's been so long since I worked with any of the build stuff. Build tools, build, create branches. I guess git grep trim. If define have malloc trim. I guess. Huh. I seem to have forgotten. It's been a while since I worked on anything. Have malloc trim. Let's try this gmake clean. Gmake again. Let's see. Oh, there it is. Oh, I can't scroll up. Can I? Is it shift page up? Nope. All right. Well, where is that done? Oh, is it in the views? Oh, that's where it is. ECFD. Right. Build. Right. Okay. Here we go. So this is like my makeshift CMake. Thank you, Marius.
Marius Zero
Zero
XFF
XFF.
just followed.
Thanks for the follow. Let's see. So it shouldn't have that defined. Let's make that H. Have fork. All right. That seems fine. So why did he have to patch that? Why? Because that function otherwise just calls malloc trim, I think. Let's see. Libfuse. Which is this? Oh, right. Fuse dot. Libfuse dot. Malloc trim. If defined, have malloc trim. Why isn't this getting picked up? Config is right there. All right. Make gmake clean gmake. So this goes into build build config. All right. Oh, I really need to get rid of that versioning stuff in there. Hello, Bogan Bits. How you doing today? Let's see. Type redefinition fuse. This, yeah, there's still a lot of cleaning up I need to do in the fuse side of things. I started porting some parts of C in the embedded libfuse that I started doing into C++. Because at this point I have bastardized libfuse so much that there's kind of no going back without starting from scratch. And so I've just been more embedding or vendoring libfuse further and further into mergerfs at this point, which is a little ironic considering I'm now a co-maintainer of libfuse. So it's not exactly great practice, but libfuse has had a bad history, and I embedded libfuse into mergerfs many years ago before I became a maintainer of the project. Which, by the way, there was a fun bug. I was posting it around, but I don't know if people have seen. Yeah, so util Linux decided to do some restructuring of how they call mount helpers. So if you aren't super familiar, let's bring up the terminal. In Linux, at least, you have what is it? An sbin, I think, usually mount. So you have all these helper scripts. So if the mount program sees that you're trying to mount something that is not known to it by the kernel, then it'll use mount dot whatever, and so I use this for mergerfs which is basically just a fork of the mount dot fuse, and but it gives me just a little bit more control. It makes it so people can just do in their fstab whatever, like, foobar is foobar is the input, baz, and then I want to mount it to whatever, mount mergerfs, and then I just call the thing mergerfs. So it looks more professional that way rather than calling it fuse.mergerfs or what have you. And it looks familiar with Linux command line. I have no idea what mergerfs is though. Okay, mergerfs is my most popular open source project. And sorry for everyone else, but this is it is a union file system that allows you to combine multiple. Well, let's see what the Fuse-based union file system geared towards simplifying storage and management of files across numerous commodity storage devices. So people will use this to take X number of file systems on devices. Usually, you have like one file system per data drive. And then you can, if you have 10 terabyte drives, now you have 100 terabytes. And it allows you to combine them in a way that is similar but different enough to be meaningful compared to other technologies. And if you're so motivated, you go to mergerfs's GitHub, you go to the documents here, and in fact, I have a where is it? Project comparisons page where I show the comparisons against a bunch of different other technologies, and some of them are defunct, but people know their names, and other ones are very well known and popular, like ZFS and Unraid or Drive Pool on Windows. And someone even asked me about Plan 9 binds recently, so I even added that. Though, I doubt very many people are using Plan 9, and let alone trying to use it for like a NAS kind of system, which is typically what my software is used for. Hello, Lord Abgrund. Yeah, yes and no. So there are a bunch of union file systems, as you can kind of see here. These are kind of all the major ones, but like MHDDFS, this has been abandoned for a while, and in fact, the author literally started using my software instead. Says, so MHDDFS, yes, there are some people that still use it, but it's pretty much a dead project. And then, or is a dead project. AUFS is a dead project. UnionFS is a dead project. UnionFS. Fuse is not really a dead project, but it's pretty damn stagnant. OverlayFS is widely used, especially because of Docker and whatnot. And then, people generally don't use JBOD, span, drive concatenation, striping, whatever. I mean, RAID 0 certainly is used a lot, but these other ones tend not to be because of the catastrophic failure that's involved with them. And Drive Pool clearly is a well-respected project, but it's a Windows program. Storage pools, yeah, I mean, effectively, right? Like it's a union file system, and you can aggregate storage together with it. Storage technologies is a very controversial space, and for a lot of people, especially in today's day, where a lot of people want to get away from cloud, but they might have a bunch of random hard drives laying around like I do. Now, of course, I'm not a great sample set because I'm the guy who wrote this stuff, but like I literally have miscellaneous storage just laying around for different purposes, and I would like to be able to combine those together in a way that is reasonably inexpensive for the average kind of consumer, while at the same time being flexible. Thank you, RW.
Just followed.
Oh, RWXITO. Right. So the people will ask, well, why not just use RAID 5? Why not use RAID 6? Why not use ZFS with some rating or something? And the problem is because they don't want to spend the money to have, X number of the same size devices. And I mean, the honest truth is if you're buying 20 plus, even less than that, 10 plus terabyte drives, and you lose one, the reslivering time is so high. I mean, I've had this happen to me. I mean, at one point one of the reasons I wrote mergerfs is because I had a RAID 5 set up years ago. A drive died. I bought a new one. It was reslivering. And in the time that it was doing that, another drive died. And then I lost everything.
I can't. I got therapy.
The aggressive type probably plays Sega.
Thank you, SM94.
94 just followed.
Docker uses overlay FS, right? Yes, it does. So they originally started using with AUFS, right? So I don't want to go necessarily on a Docker rant, but I've been in the container space since kind of it started, and I've helped build container platforms. And their idea, which I think was short-sighted, was to create this user union file system in the copy on write style that UnionFS is, which UnionFS is actually written by the same individual who wrote Fuse too, though, and he's still involved in both projects, but less so in Fuse nowadays. And so they used AUFS, and the problem with AUFS is that it was included in some distros, but not all, and it never got upstreamed, in part because people claimed that the code was not up to snuff. And the interesting thing about AUFS, and even for a while before I wrote mergerfs, I used AUFS because it had the ability to do creation policies. So you could say when a file gets created, I've got, 5 locations, in my pool, and I want you to pick the one with the most free space or something, right? And that was one thing that was really unique about AUFS versus other technologies. But it never got upstreamed, and while, like I say here, you could in theory get better peak performance, the reality is it was never upstreamed. Getting everyone to build against some kernel patches is not a great way to get your technology adopted, and it just didn't work out in the long run. And then a lot of people used MHDDFS because it was in user space, it was easy to get moving, but the guy who wrote it, no offense, but he just really didn't know what he was doing from a Unix safety perspective. And in fact, I should probably put that information here, though I think maybe I put it in the FAQ. I had in my old docs a big blurb about why MHDDFS was not real safe. Let's see if I go to search. Oh yeah, here we go. Thank God for the search system now. So I go into it in detail here, but don't worry, mortal people are not that rich to buy 10 terabyte drives. Actually, I don't know what's 10 terabyte drives are doing these days. In fact, as you can see, I already had this up. I was looking at the cost of drives. Let's drop this down to 10 terabyte. I mean, 840 a terabyte is not so bad. 16 terabyte at only 9. I mean, not that there's many 10 terabytes showing up here, but the price for 10 terabytes isn't so bad. But when I had my giant outage, it was 3 terabyte drives. I had those bad batch of 3 terabyte Seagates, and it was all these are used, but the reality is these used enterprise drives, I have the same luck that I do if I buy retail drives and shuck them or what have you. I have had to send back 2 used drives over the past, I don't know, 4 or 5 years maybe, and both of them were DOA, right? That they were dead the second I got them. So, but every other drive I've gotten refurbished has been totally fine, and compared to buying them new over the past, I don't know, 15 to 20 years, I haven't kept metrics, but I would not be surprised if they are at least as reliable as buying new drives. Bogan Bits says, I have a big fat RAID 5 array. I have spaced out purchases of drives since hearing other stories like yours. Yeah, I mean, and that's one of the things. Like people one either don't want to spend that kind of money all at once, or they I mean, that's probably the biggest one, actually, is that they don't want to spend all that money all at the same time. Because, I mean, what if we're looking at what were the prices there? I mean, 10 terabytes, $10 a terabyte on the lowest end. You're looking at $100 per 10 terabytes, give or take. And so, if I think the sweet spot for my users seems to be in the like 25 to 50 terabyte range. That's a lot of usable space, right? Where people have maybe a bunch of pictures of their family and they want to keep the originals, in their original form. That can take up a decent amount of space. But the biggest thing is like movies and TV shows, right? So especially if you're doing torrenting stuff and or you rip your own like ultra HD Blu-ray of The Simpsons or something, right? Like that takes up a massive amount of space. And if you're ripping your own stuff, then and I have to discuss this with people all the time. And in fact, I think similarly in my docs, I kind of have some suggestions because people ask like, what policy should I use? And it really, or what settings, blah, blah, blah. Like it really comes down to what your use case is. But if you keep all your Blu-rays and DVDs and stuff, and you can always rip them again, then you're probably not going to spend the money on the backup. If it is important to you, then you're going to do a backup. And so if you lose the drive, then you're just going to recover from backup anyway. If whether that's cloud backup or a secondary storage of backup. If you're torrenting stuff off the internet, you can never know when a torrent is still going to be available. And programs like Sonar and Radar and whatever I guess Sonar will fill in the gaps to a TV show. So if you've got 2 episodes on one drive and 10 on another and blah, 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 like people say, oh, I want to co-locate all this stuff. I'm concerned if I have a failure, what's going to happen? You can't predict when you have a failure. Right? Like even if I've had drives that have bad sectors and totally fucked up smart readings, like to the point where the smart device is completely corrupted, and I've had drives that last 10 plus years nonstop, no problem in that state. And I've had drives that had 0 smart issues and just suddenly shit the bed. Right? And so I don't think you can try to plan for failure. And then and if you're backing stuff up, you can recover if it's piecemeal. If you lose data across the like mergerfs pool and some stuff is on one drive and on another. So if you have backup, you can just recover piecemeal. rsync works great for that, or rclone. And then if you're using the torrenting stuff, then that can fill in as well. So there's very limited need to either co-locate data onto a specific drive or even have higher availability. And most people aren't willing to pay for that. I'm running a 2x 500 gig drive in RAID 1. Had to convert from ZFS RAID Z with 3 drives when one died and rebuilt into RAID 1. Thinking about buying 3 1 terabyte drives, maybe SSD prices are the same though. Yeah, so what a lot of people will do when they're using mergerfs with and they want to have very they're really concerned about safeguarding data. What they tend to do is either use ZFS and make that, they'll use or they'll use RAID 1 or RAID 5 or ZFS, some RAID Z, whatever, and then merge that with other random drives that they have. So that way they have storage allocated appropriately and willing to spend appropriately. Because if you put all of your storage in ZFS under some RAID Z pool, then you have certain issues that can be expensive to resolve. Whereas if you split the stuff and then use something like mergerfs on top of it, then or just keep them separate, right? Like if you're using Plex or something and you happen to have your kids' home movies on your ZFS pool for reliability and whatnot, then you can just add that as a directory, and then add for your movies and TV shows as separate directories from your mergerfs pool. I don't have any RAID pools at the moment. What I've been doing mostly is backups. So over the years, I've collected so many random hard drives as I upgrade that I use them, even if they're in a bad state, right? Like even if they freak out when I do too much load on them over the SATA bus or something, I will keep them around, because why throw out like if I can read and write any data to it, even if it's in a flaky way, then, and I have this physical space to store the drive just in a closet or whatever, then I might as well keep that. And that tends to be what I do, is just copy the data and have a lot of redundancy. That's certainly not an enterprise solution, but it works well enough for me. Do people just install this on a NAS or also on their PC? Both. So there is, if you look at related projects, so like there's a bunch of NAS operating systems that include mergerfs as part of their default packages. So like Ice Whale, who created the Zima Blade and Zima Cube and Zima Board and whatever else, their OSs include it out of the box. Open Media Vault, it's very popular to use mergerfs with that. I just install Debian or Ubuntu and use it there. I find it's pretty trivial. If I look at the quick start, it really doesn't take a whole lot to get going. And the nice thing is you're not formatting anything, right? And you're not changing the underlying file system. You're still using ZFS or extension 4 or XFS or whatever the hell you want to use within reason. And it's like SnapRAID in that way, right? SnapRAID works on top of existing file systems and creates parity data. And that's why it's commonly used with mergerfs, where both technologies allow you to mix and match the sizes and the storage technologies and whatever, and then just write the parity data off to the side and then use that for recovery in case of failure or file deletion or whatever. And then mergerfs gives you that unified file system view that is just convenient. It's not always necessary. And of course there's overhead, but for most use cases, it's not that big of a deal. Same idea as mine. Use it until undetected by BIOS. Yeah, I mean, why else? I mean, I've got this drive that I was showing. I mean, at one point I was hoping that these 2.5-inch drives would just keep getting, slightly bigger and still be released, but they kind of stopped at 5 terabyte, and their prices have stayed the same since forever, pretty much. But this guy is totally dead, I think. I have to double check it, but I still have probably have like upwards of 10 plus 10 to like 14 terabyte drives sitting around. Some of the, or no, 8 terabytes to probably 14 terabytes. And some of those 8 terabyte Seagates are not in the best shape, but I throw some data on it, and then worst case scenario, you take it out of the closet and it doesn't work anymore, and you've just done enough duplication that it doesn't matter. BogoBips, I've been using Linux for a while. I have achieved a similar effect to mergerfs using with a web of symlinks. Yeah, I mean, that's, in fact, if you look at SnapRAID, is it .it? I think they're out of Italy. So it's not a widely used feature of Symlink. Symlink is file symlinks. I was looking for this actually the other day. I'm pretty sure that SnapRAID, like you create a logical pool of with SnapRAID for doing your redundancy, for creating your parity, and then there's like a SnapRAID create symlinks, and it'll create a directory where it symlinks. It'll create directories for all the directories and like overlap them, kind of like what mergerfs does, and then symlinks the hell out of everything. In fact, I've been considering building a tool that does that, which arguably would kind of compete with mergerfs. And in fact, mergerfs has a symlink mode. I call it symlink if by. It's very, very catchy name. I don't know if anyone actually uses it. I should probably check that it still works after years of uncertainty of use, but this will create symlinks out of stuff. Oh, El Conclu Q, hello, and thank you for the resubscription. Herm, off topic. NAS OS is a bloated thing in my opinion. I was running FreeNAS, then it was changed to TrueNAS, but RAM usage was too high even at idle. With one pool, 4 gigs of RAM is not even enough to be usable. Therefore, I switched to Debian, installed ZFS and Docker, been running Jellyfin, Portainer, Nextcloud. Yeah, I mean, the problem is, what's interesting, having run mergerfs as a project for over a decade now, there are a lot of people who have no fucking clue about operating computers really in general, right? Like, they're just random folks. They're not developers. They're not sysadmins. They're not anything. And they want, like, but they have some amount of interest in the space maybe, and they don't want to spend the high prices for the kind of out of the box experience that QNAP and Synology and stuff will give you. And these people kind of meander into mergerfs somehow because they read some Reddit thread, or who fucking knows. Honestly, I really don't know where all these folks tend to come from. And that's, if you read my documentation, that's kind of why in some ways it's very verbose and more exhaustive in the topics that it discusses than you might find in something that is so low level, because I really do have a lot of people who are total Linux noobs and really need a lot of hand-holding, which, that's fine. I mean, I would rather them, teach a man to fish kind of situation. And I've tried to go back and forth with those kinds of high-level OSs, the NAS OSs, and find one that would be easy enough to justify its use, but flexible enough for when I need to get a little bit dirty. And it doesn't matter what it is. All the power and luck to projects like Open Media Vault and Casa OS and Cosmos and whatever, all these different projects. TrueNAS, people are asking for mergerfs and TrueNAS. Like, I wish them all the luck, but for my purposes, it's just not good enough. And so, yeah, I similarly just use Ubuntu or Debian and Pod. Well, I'm trying to transition away from Docker to Podman, but otherwise, yeah. CP has the S option, yeah, which I've never used. Speaking of that sort of thing, I have a request. I need an unalterated version of Terry Davis. You have written an interrupt routine skit. I have heard you might know where I can get that. Well, I don't know what video that's from, but I have the video. So that's right. So I run, I don't want to say, I mean, that sounds odd because I really don't do anything with it, but I'm responsible for templeos.org. It was granted to me, let's say, by the community. And I try to make that clear here. And if you look on archive.org, despite the fact that I've been banned from the account that I uploaded this from, it's quite complete. And so the video will be here, but I can't say that I'm an expert in all the videos and where it might be. But if you have any inclination as to what the name of the video was, you can find it here. And seed if you have an extra terabyte of space and would like to make sure that the stuff doesn't disappear. But yeah, I years ago I had a wiki on the site that I tried to get crowdsourcing help to point out like interesting or noteworthy parts of videos, and I just got nowhere with it. And I'm certainly not going to sit down and read or watch, like, I don't know, there's got to be like thousands of hours of video, right? So I've got other things to do. Kind of amazed by QNAP and Synology old hardware. I used to run 2-core Celeron with 2 gigs RAM doing RAID 1, had 0 issues. Yeah, I mean, I think the problem was that problem. The context is that in the old days, I think those NAS solutions were very purpose built for nothing but being a NAS, and over time, people have expected. Excuse me, I don't know why I'm so burpy. The people have expected a lot more from their NASs, and so QNAP and Synology have to figure out a way to make it so that their product is in a price range that is going to be purchased by the target audience, which I think on the low end is certainly probably folks like ourselves, and maybe small businesses, but then has enough value add to be competitive with either rolling your own or TrueNAS or these other, more off the shelf, in the sense that you can just install TrueNAS on pretty regular generic hardware, and that's difficult, right? Like it's very easy to suddenly, especially when they are creating the OS and everything, but people want to be able to run like Plex and what have you on their machines. It's like, okay, well, they can't get away with 2 gigs of RAM anymore. They can't get away with just 2 cores. Thankfully, the modern Intel and AMD chips on the low end are powerful enough that it doesn't make much of a difference, but it's a tough space. I think they're kind of getting squeezed, and it'll be interesting to see where they go in the next couple of years. But also, I don't think the performance is actually required for small NAS units, but I'd rather have an ARM. See, I remember the old days of ARM, and even before that, MIPS. Like my first NAS was a MIPS. Oh damn, I can't remember. It was an old ass MIPS chip. It was so old that they didn't have hardware. They didn't have the instructions on the instruction set to do any sort of mutexes. So they had to like create mutexes in software, which greatly slowed down Linux on the machine, or any OS that needed mutexes. And I remember that distinctly because I used it as a test bed. I installed Debian on it and used it as a test bed when I tried to create a atomic library, like libatomic kind of thing for SDL many moons ago. I mean, this has got to be 20 years ago almost. And like those things were dogs, right? Like they did not perform particularly well. But then again, hard drives at the time were slow as hell, so it didn't really matter. But then, they started putting out ARM devices. The problem with ARM, though, is, yeah, the consumption is lower. The power consumption is lower. But, is it repurposable? And it's really not, because they tend to use very, like, bespoke SoCs that don't have great Linux support. And so the kernel stays old, and the system, you can't do much with it. And I did that for a little while and realized it just wasn't worth my time. Like, I'd rather take a machine, especially nowadays where you can get Intel chips, x86 stuff that is reasonably low on the consumption side, on power consumption, like the N100 chips. And you can get a total power consumption of less than 10 watts if everything is idle, and not have to worry about that. And that's where TrueNAS and Open Media Vault and all these other technologies, I think, come in and help out a lot. But no, I mean, I hear you. I try to use my hardware as long as I possibly can. I mean, the machine that I'm on right now, I bought secondhand just like a year and a half ago, maybe, and it was an 8th gen Intel machine, Nook kind of thing. And yeah, like Dell small form factor is great. I have a HP G3, mini computer that I used as a makeshift NAS for a little while. My biggest problem, the reason I moved away from that, is that, if you're looking at like early USB 3 era, so what's that, like 2010 to 2016, that whole era, the USB controllers were really shitty. And so if you bought USB 3 devices. It was it 2008. I'm trying to remember when like third and fourth generation Intel Core chips came out. But that era, like those those USB 3 controllers were just garbage. And also, so were the SATA to USB bridge chips that they used in a lot of NAS devices. So I have some, I still use them. Was it not Cyber Power? I'm blanking. But anyway, it's like a it's a USB 3 and eSATA, I think, with 4 SATA, 3.5-inch bays. And I had 4 of those at one point. And I had, I think, yeah, it was like a third generation. I was trying to be low power, so I bought was it a 3100T or something, right? The low power variant of like a Core i5 or something. Or yeah, 3500T, something like that. And the problem was just if one drive has a hiccup, whether that hiccup is because of the drive itself and resets, or if the SATA controller messes up, or the USB controller messes up. If any of those things happen, whether it's a hardware fault or a software fault, it would reset all the drives in the particular bay. And I had 4 of them, right? So I had up to 16 drives, 4 in a enclosure. And if one of the drives was starting to go bad, or for whatever reason, because of the SATA chip, because of the USB controller, whatever, had a brain fart, it would cause all 4 disks to reset. And that was just like unacceptable over time. It just became too much, because then I'd have to like reboot the machines or unmount everything, and then or FSCK all the drives, and it just became a nightmare. And so then I realized that it's actually cheaper if you have a machine that can handle it. It's cheaper to buy an old enterprise HBA and get an enclosure that you can fit them all in. And I lucked out in that regard. I found on eBay for like $30 a generic drive enclosure that could handle 8 drives, and I bought 2 of those. And I just fished some, I forget what the specific model is of the connector, but from an HBA, a SAS HBA, to I have a 16 external HBA controller. So there's 4 ports on the back. Each port can be broken out into 4 SATA devices. And so I would just fish the wires through that. And, the stability was infinitely better. And I probably paid less than $50 for that HBA. And and you're plugging straight, besides the power supply to power the drives, you're plugging straight from the HBA into the enclosures don't have any hardware. They're just there's no backplane or anything. You just plug, which is a little annoying to be fair, but you just plug into that, and then the stability and performance was infinitely better. It was like way less hassle to maintain, and the cost was cheaper, and the performance was just everything was better in every way. And I did that for a while. My one thing I considered doing to work around that, because it's hard to get HBAs if you don't if you want to have like a low power system, you want to buy like a mini PC, and then you want to try to have a makeshift NAS. My suggestion nowadays is to use these. So you can get these very thin USB 3 SATA adapters, USB to SATA adapters. You can buy them for like last time I checked, anyone when I bought this, it was like $4 maybe for one of these guys off AliExpress. And the idea, and I never got around to doing this, but the idea is you buy a USB hub like this guy. So this has 16 ports, I think. Yeah. Powered USB hub. And then you get a bunch of these guys, and you shove this in the back of some enclosure that you have. You mount all your drives, you plug in this, and you plug that into your USB device. And so if any one drive fails, it's one USB controller, one SATA USB per one drive. And so you're not going to run into the problem where a single, because it's almost impossible to even discover whether or not an enclosure, like what the chip is and if it's going to fail in this particular way. And so you have to kind of learn the hard way that if you get a failure, that it's going to cascade. And so if you're using these guys, you're not going to cascade. I also bought these for like a SATA like SSD NAS, and because they're so thin and don't take any more room than an actual SATA drive, then you can like tightly pack them in, so you get these like little whatchamacallit, like metal bands, and just like shim them together, and you could do like a 3D printed box and just put these all in there. And so the performance is not going to be fantastic, but who the hell cares, right? Like, how fast are those direct SATA? You're going to saturate, right? Because SATA maxes out at 6 gigabit. SATA 3 is 6 gigabit and USB 3 is 5. So, SATA 3 is faster, but not by much. And most of the time, you're not going to get close to that 6 gigabit anyway, depending on the device. Now, if you're doing SATA, of course, then yes. So you are giving up a little bit of performance, but in practice, right? Like it's a difference of degrees. It's not really a difference of kind in terms of performance. Like this isn't like going from NVMe, Gen 4 to SATA, where it's like 500, maxes out at 500 megs a second, kind of on the high end. So it's not perfect, but the thing is, like, none of these technologies for the home are all that great. Like if you have an HBA, an enterprise HBA, like you can get them cheap, but they run hot. So you're going to have to make sure that you have like a fan either on the device, or make sure that the airflow in the device, in the chassis of your server is sufficient to keep it cool. Having those enterprise cables, which I probably have some laying around, but they're kind of awkward and stiff and kind of host bus adapter, HBA host bus, I think. Host adapter. Right, so this is like, so this is a card, plugs in PCIe, and this is similar to what I have, but it uses an older interconnect. And so this would be like a SAS HBA versus a RAID controller, right? And in fact, most of these HBAs are often RAID controllers, and then you can flash them. I forget what they call it, host mode or something, where effectively you just, instead of SAS, it just runs SATA. And so like so this is an HBA, right? So it's a storage controller adapter. And so you can get these if you go on eBay. I mean, you can get like an LSI, what is it, like 9200 or something? Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, here you go. 6 gigabit LSI, 6 gigabit per second SAS, HBA, a 9211. 8i means 8 internal. If it was 8e, it would mean external. And it can typically, in small form factor, the most you can get is 8, maybe 12 connector, or 2 or 3 connectors, which can break out to, like, so each of these you see here. Right, so there's these 2 cables, and it uses SFF 87 form factor, and it breaks out into 4 SATA connectors, right? So this one card directly can handle 8 drives. Now the hardware itself, like the actual chip, can handle more than that. And then this is where you get into like, well, how do they, when you're in an enterprise scenario, how do you get these like giant arrays that are more than, say, 16? Because like here, this is 16E. Actually, this might be the card I have, or damn close. Yeah, so this is the connector that I have on my device. And so like this, each one of these can handle 4 drives, so that's 16 drives. Where do you go to find secondhand drives? Recently, so there's places like, what is it? Where is it? I've actually been looking at buying another drive. So I've been looking around, but there's, did I close the window? Well, I mean, if you go, this if you go to driveprices.com, pretty much I think everything is from Amazon. And there are, so you can see here, right? So there's this company. What's happening is MDD, this Max Digital Data, what they do is, this is really whatever, like a Seagate drive or Western Digital drive or something. And then there's these companies like MDD that buy them, refurbish them, and then sell them back into enterprise for like cloud scale out stuff, where a lot of the redundancy is managed in software, not in hardware. So when drives die, it's not a big deal. And so you can get pretty good prices right off of Amazon from these. And these come with like this has a 3-year warranty, and right, like they don't want to be replacing drives. So generally I've had 2 out of maybe 10 or 15 drives. I've had 2 DOA drives. And honestly, I think it might have been a shipping problem. And not necessarily because of the vendor, because the vendor does put it in like a singular box. Well, when I bought one anyway, it was like a singular box with like it's like this winged kind of padding thing that they use that suspends the drive in the center of the box. So I don't know that it was the shipping per se, but in any case, I've had like 2 DOAs, but like it's way better to be dead on arrival and then have to send it back and get another one. But the other drives that I've gotten have all been fine. No better or worse than if I buy them new, in my experience. So I tend to like the past 2-3 years, I've just gone straight to Amazon. But you can also get them on eBay, I think, like refurbished HDD. Like I'm sure they're on here. And you can even get them from like Seagate themselves. They'll sell their own refurbished drives. And then where else? There's what's that server company? Refurbished HDD. Like there's one company, they're more expensive from like the company. Yeah, like Server Parts Deal. That's who I was thinking of. Do they sell plain old? Yeah, these are plain old SATA drives. Like that, they'll sell different kinds. Like you can get SAS drives too. See, you can just, what did I do? Like you can even pick the capacity, you can pick the brand, and just say, oh, I only want SATA. There's even a 26. Oh man, how expensive is that sucker? It's probably, even refurbished, it's probably pricey. $340. That's actually not terrible. What's that? Let's see. Oh, they even have 28? Or is that? Let's see. What's that? 410 divided by 28? 14. Yeah, I mean, that's a little pricey per terabyte, but that's, you just kind of do the math. And again, they generally have good warranties. And this one has a 2-year, but some of them are like 5-year. So if the drive dies, and I've had 0 problem getting drives replaced. That every package I got comes with a little like business card, and you send them. You go to their website, like probably, let's see, MDD hard drive. I think it's just like a website you go to. You put in the Go hard drive. Never heard of that. But yeah, I think they just like send you a link. You fill in the details for an RMA, and then if I remember right, they just sent the box, and then you send it back. Otherwise, they charge you or something. Like it's super simple. Never had any real concerns. And if you're going through a lot of drives, like, okay, assume that the refurbished drives don't live as long, but you have to kind of do the math, like. Is the amount of money I'm saving, if the drive costs like 40% more per drive, that means if I buy like 2.5 drives, then effectively I could buy another drive. And so, is it worth it to you? And again, in my experience over the years, buying any one random drive, it's a total crapshoot as to whether or not it survives a reasonable amount of time. I still have hard drives from like the 90s that chug along perfectly fine. And then I've got drives that I bought like 2 years ago and they completely shit the bed. You don't even have lower than a 12. My country, a 12 gig in my country, 1 terabyte is new is $50. Yeah, well, okay. I mean, that's a problem too. I mean, depending on where you're at, but in the States, at least, it's easy enough. How often do drive die on you? You know, it seems to come in waves. Probably because in the past, anyway, I would buy in waves, and you know, one of the worst things you can do if you're, back to the conversation about RAID is if you build a RAID array with all drives from the same manufacturer, from the same batch, more or less, you're putting yourself at a great risk. And which is ironic considering they generally tell you use the same drive for your array. But if you do that and there's a catastrophic failure in the design of that drive, then, and you have RAID 5, 6, whatever, one, if there are problems like getting that, you're not going to feel safe getting that same drive in the future. And then it's probably still going to be a fragile, right? Like the drive itself is going to be fragile. So you pull out the bad drive, you put in the new drive, but the new drive you're not sure about. And then in between, one of the other in reslivering, one of the other drives can die. And that is increasingly, even since drives got to like, I don't know, 5+ terabytes, this has been a major issue. But I mean, I had my last big catastrophic failure was the 3 terabyte Seagates. They were super popular. I bought like 8 of them or something because I was just doing a massive upgrade. I was just like, fuck it, I'm gonna just go all in. And that was probably the dumbest thing I could have done, because it was like, it felt like every fucking week after maybe a year and a half, like every other week I was having a bad drive or weird problems, or they would, this is back to the whole, like what part of the whole system is failing. USB back then was not great. And so I couldn't tell if it was USB controller that was freaking out. Was it a driver issue? Was it the SATA to USB adapter? Whatever. And was it SATA? Because I was doing eSATA for a time, and like eSATA can be very finicky if you don't have good cables. So, you end up just like swapping cables and swapping drives and swapping enclosures. And I must have spent so much damn time. But I mean, at the end of the day, those drives were fundamentally fucked. And if you look at what is it? That one company that does the hard drive reports, I'm sure that those drives have been expunged from their reports. But back in the day, you saw this massive spike of failures for those specific drives, for those batches. And I had a similar thing happen. Yeah, Backblaze, thank you. And I had a similar issue with 8 terabyte Seagates. Because 8 terabyte, I think, was like this plateau zone for a while where you could get really inexpensive 8 terabyte external Seagate drives, and I would chuck them. And I still have a few of them, but they have been more troublesome for me than other Seagate models and from other brands as well. So, I mean, it's hard to say how often they die because I just have so many drives now, and so many of them are in half-ass broken states, but I just use them to back up data. And in fact, it's on my to-do list in the new year to set up I bought a Zima Cube from Ice Whale, because the real reason, I didn't really need a new server, but these guys used mergerfs in their Casa OS and Zima OS, and were kind enough to send me like some units to play with, which actually, yeah, I used to have them on my desk, but now I actually have them doing useful things like backing up laptops and stuff. But I ended up buying a Zima Cube, which comes with the 6+1 drives, and I bought some new secondhand, refurbished drives, and then reused some of the old ones I had. So I have like maybe a 3 or 4 20 terabytes, and then like a 16 and a 14. And then this +1 hybrid is actually a PCIe multiplexer with 4 M.2 slots, and so you can put M.2 storage in there as well. And then there's 2 M.2s inside the chassis. And so I kind of moved my main server over to this guy in kind of a way to support them. And on my old server, I still have, well, because I only had 6 slots in this thing, I had to buy bigger drives and consolidate. And then my older drives, because I have a, what is it, Silverstone C380? Is that it? Maybe it's 280. Oh, this looks like it. Yeah, I've got this guy. Yeah, CS 380. So this has 8 drive bays. If the door, is there a photo? Yeah, so this guy. So I've got this, and my HBA is in this guy connecting these 8 drives. Plus, I have an external enclosure with another 8 drives, and so the HBA connects to that as well, or at least it did. It's not at the moment. At the moment, it's all over my office floor. But I'm gonna repurpose this guy. It's got an old Haswell 4th generation Intel ASUS not data center workstation motherboard. So this thing has like the setup I has like 4 8x plus 8 to 16x PCIe slots. That's why I bought it. I was able to get it pretty inexpensively, even though even at the time I bought it was pretty old. But I can put in not graphics cards, but I just wanted to be able to put in different PCIe cards. And so I was able to put in like an HBA, and I have an NVIDIA, what is it, P2000 for doing encoding for my Plex server. And I had a, who was it? Totally blanking. I have one of those like PCIe to SATA like backplane adapters that I was sent for review some time ago by the company that's name is escaping me. And then I had, I have this card that I found on AliExpress. So I got my hands on. So another thing that it's really great, and I think people who do ZFS and like TrueNAS do this more often, but you can get what is it? NVMe PCIe adapter. Probably I have to sign in. But there's these cards that are PCIe bridge cards, bridge, and I was able to get one pretty inexpensively. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, maybe not NVMe. For like less than $100, I have this card, and I think it's like an 8X card, 8X PCIe, and then it breaks out to NVMe. Actually, give me a second. I can go get it. Let's see. See myself in the camera so I can show this off, right? Actually, get some more light in here. So I've got this guy. Oh my, I didn't realize that the thing was overlapping, the chat was overlapping my person. Let me fix that 1 second. I have it locked. Where the hell is the chat? There we go. That's a little bit better. Okay, so I've got this guy. So this looks like an HBA, but it is in fact not. It is a under the under this is a PCIe multiplexer chip. And so you can use cable like this to then connect into this guy. And there's 8 ports. And so you can get from one PCIe 16, you can get, and without having bifurcation in your BIOS, which I do not, you can then plug this in to NVMe, which I actually have. Well, this is a U.2, M.2 to U.2 converter. So you can see versus a SATA drive for those who may not be familiar. So here's a old dead 128 gig Kingston SSD. But you can see how in the center here, right, there's no pins, and in this guy there are pins, and that's where the NVMe connection actually goes. And so then you provide some SATA power, and then plug this guy in, and you've got yourself an NVMe drive. And so what you do is you go on eBay. Now, prices right now are not that good, but like, I don't know, 2 years ago, give or take, if we go NVMe U.2, about 2 years ago, I mean, the prices are still honestly not bad, but, oh, what's this? A high performance, yeah. Oh, that looks interesting. There's always interesting drives out there, but like, oh, that's not a bad price at all. So like here, you can get a 3.84 terabyte U.2 NVMe drive. Enterprise, this is an enterprise scale drive, less than $200. So for my metric for the past year or so has been if I can get it for less than $50 US dollars a terabyte, then that's like a reasonable deal. And like, yes, this is a used device. But the reality, what people don't realize is that a lot of companies will buy. Okay, this one says a decent number of hours on it, and writes. So maybe that's why it's so cheap. But does it say? Yeah, okay, like up to 8.4 petabyte of writes or 1 drive of write per day. So you can. Okay, that's getting kind of close. All right, so this drive maybe is not a great example, but you can find yourself drives that have pretty low writes on them. They might have high hours, but they've just been sit idle because all these companies will buy these NVMe drives and then they just get used for like casual logging or the OS or something. And so the amount of writes to these drives is not actually that high. And so I will, keep an eye. I have a bunch of alerts on eBay and look for kind of like less than $50. So I'll put in alerts for like 7.68 terabytes and whatever, because you won't find retail drives that size typically. And then I just look for deals. Every once in a while something comes in cheap enough, and I'll try to get one if it makes sense. Like right now I have a 7.68. I have one 7.68. I have one 3.84. The 7.68 I use for the streaming stuff, right? So the whole Computer Chronicles and forming the Temple OS streaming. So all the content. I have a Zima Blade. So right. So Zima board, the Zima Blade product, and the Zima board product. So there's this PCIe connector on the side of the device. So this is running like an old Intel quad-core Celeron style processor. Doesn't have much performance, but it one of them has 8 gigs of RAM. The other one I put 16 gigs of RAM, and I plug in a little PCIe board in the side, and it's enough to power the the U.2 drive. And so yeah, that's what's streaming Computer Chronicles 24/7 and Temple OS stuff 24/7. And then I have another one of these that is my backup, and that one uses basically the 4 terabyte drive, and that's enough for me to like rsnapshot / rclone every server that I have, every desktop that I have, laptop, whatever, and it just runs every night, and that's been enough for that purpose. And so I just have multiple devices around doing these things. And I've found over the years using like cheaper, older machines in that form is just easier to maintain. They'd be idea for media server where you're only going to write once yourself. Yeah, I mean, yeah, maybe in that place, right? If you can get a highly used drive for a good price and it has a lot of writes on it, like it's still probably going to be better than advertised, right? That's the kind of minimal cutoff. And these are enterprise drives. And if you're going to do like use mergerfs or something, and it's like a write once, read many, you're going to get the performance, power wise, right? Like these drives consume more power than an M.2 SSD does, but it's the U.2 is what I mean. Right now, you can on Amazon, I think you can get an M.2, a cheap M.2 for maybe $200 ish for 4 gigs or 4 terabytes, and like, yeah, technically that's a little bit more than 3.84, and it's going to use a little bit more power, but likely this guy is going to be much more reliable. So you've got to consider that as part of your calculations. But yeah, I've got a couple of these Intel Dell U.2 drives. But anyway, that's what I bought this for, so that I could have 8 drives in my server. Never really worked out that well. The biggest pain is how do you mount them? And in that Silverstone enclosure, it just didn't really work out so well. I mean, I find that the biggest hassle has not been the controllers or the drives themselves. It's been how to host the damn things, like physically. And that's one of the reasons I've considered buying a 3D printer, because then I could just print my own stuff. And then maybe, if it's a U.2 drive, because the thing is, these U.2 drives can be up to 15 millimeters, I think, which is pretty tall. And so they're not going to fit in all your normal like SATA kind of situation. Like this guy is much. What is this? I think this is like a 7 millimeter versus a 15 millimeter. So there's quite a bit of difference there. And so like finding a place to put them in a enclosure is kind of a pain. Lots of cheaper Amazon ones don't have cache either. The write speeds bomb when you try to shove a few gigs on one. Oh yeah, certainly. I mean, I've got a couple of those lying around that I've done for reviews and stuff. And again, the thing is, people don't need things to be fast. They need to be fast enough. And it is very common for, say, I wanted to see what that thing was. Like users of mergerfs. What is this thing? Those look like M.2 slots. Oh, does this allow you to like combine 4 different M.2 drives into a single thing? Viking Enterprise Solutions. This is basically what's inside the Zima Cube, but this seems fancier, or at least more compact in some way, because it's like in a U.2 form factor, but it looks like you can fit 4. But I wonder if it has to be RAID or something. I don't think I've seen this kind of thing quite before. But anyway, it's pretty common for people to do tiered caching with mergerfs. And opened up so many windows. Let's see. Tiered cache. So, like, I have instructions on how to kind of set up a tiered caching system, because mergerfs doesn't natively support one. But it's easy enough to kind of make a makeshift tiered caching by creating 2 different pools, and you target writes to one pool and then reads from the other pool, and then you just do like a migration with an rsync script or something between the two. It actually works really well, but I try to make sure that people understand that most of the time you don't need tiered caching, right? So again, similarly, if you have an SSD that has terribly slow writes, like, is it really that big of a deal? Is the write so slow that your network is going to saturate it? Like, it is possible if you get a really, really bad SSD, but, it's like the shingled drives years ago. People would talk about, they're too slow. It's like, if you have a Plex server and you're the only one writing from it or writing to it, and you're really the only person reading from it, like it's for you and your family, even a shingled drive is going to read like hundreds of megabytes, like 100 megabytes a second or 60 megabytes a second. And as long as you don't have like 5 different streams reading from the same hard drive at the same time and having to thrash back and forth, you're going to be fine. And even in those cases, the operating system is going to read ahead and cache stuff. And so you're like, the statistical likelihood that you run into serious problems is really low. And so I just generally tell people, do this when you run into the problem, not beforehand, because it just complicates the setup. There are PCIe cards that can take 4 too. Yeah. What if you're writing 100,000 files to it, like say you're building software on it? Well, yeah, I mean, in that that's a different thing altogether, right? But most of the use cases that I see are through mergerfs, and mergerfs is not intended for those kinds of situations generally. Not that people don't abuse it for that, but like you're pulling slow devices that are kind of write once, read many, and building software. Having that as an artifact, temporary artifact store is generally not the use case for mergerfs, but people have done that. For sure. I mean, I've seen people do crazy ass shit. I think I have production. Yeah. I mentioned how from routers to multi-socket Xeon servers, people have used mergerfs. And so on the latter, people have done some absolutely crazy shit. Basically, people who didn't know how to set up or maintain a distributed file system like CIF or something, or one of the many different kind of distributed file systems, and ended up doing like crazy shit. I mean, they would like spin up on AWS multiple EC2 instances and then storage on them, because you could only, I guess, attach so much storage to one device. Or one server. And so they had like mergerfs pulling together a bunch of NFS shares that were all on these other like storage servers. And I think they did it multi-way, maybe even, because they were basically creating a cluster for a Plex like piracy thing that they sold. Whatever, you pay like $5 a month and you get access to their crazy Plex system. And so I think that's what they did. They had like multiple of these like enterprise Xeon systems, multi socket systems, and then they would allocate as much as they could storage to them, which is probably all remote storage anyway, but looks like a block device. Then they would format it with a file system, share that file system over NFS to one of the other servers, and then to spread the load around, they would kind of like round robin any customers that they got, and really, abusing the shit out of mergerfs, but it worked, I guess. And of course, I never got a cut out of any of that because they were doing shady shit, and I don't think they wanted to be advertising it by donating and or supporting my work. But yeah. Anyway, that was a hell of a tangent. But feel free to continue to ask questions. If I didn't want to go on these tangents, I wouldn't be streaming. So let's go back to some of this FreeBSD stuff. So what do we have fail here? Okay, set affinity failed. That is reasonable. Though this suggests that it should work, because this says it's a FreeBSD man page. FreeBSD schedule get affinity documented to use a PID 0 to refer. Okay, like this is an actual bug report for the syscall, or for at least for libc. So I wonder why he had to comment this out. Fine. Let's see. Rep. Does it have R? Because they're going to be using BSD grep, so recursive, I imagine. So user include schedule, or no, that's, yeah. Passing argument parameter PID here. Oh, pthread set affinity. Well, let's try one of these. What is it set? Oh, this user include. Interesting. Passing argument to parameter PID error and pthread set p. Huh. All right. Interesting. So, okay, let's look at the signature here. You would think they'd be the same. But clearly, there's a problem. And pthreads. Pthread T. And they should be the same if they're part of pthreads. It looks the same. Some const differences. But, oh no, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong one. They're in different orders. All right. So let's make, see what this error is again. Maybe I should have tried a graphical thing so I could make the font bigger. Hello? Is it really that slow? All right, well, okay, there we go. No, candidate function not viable. Cannot convert incomplete type. Okay, let's look at this. CPU. Okay, 28. Size of set. There's no such thing as slow, only impatience. There it is. Okay, it's slower. How's that? Slower. Pthread affinity, thread type. Type PID T, aka int, with an alpha. Where is it getting PID? Thread ID is PID. Is thread ID the same as PID ID in, or PID in type PID, aka in, with the L value of type const. Well, all right. So maybe that's why they they did it the way they did it. Something to look at perhaps later. If we can just get it to build. Well, let's do one at a time. Okay, so I did make the change on CPU HPP, right? This is what they did. And this should probably, I wonder if I can get away with, because ideally this would actually be in the C file, or the CPP file, not here. But let's try pushing this I wish you could make it so it doesn't grab the mouse every time. Git log. Okay. Git push. And then we will git fetch. Git checkout. BSD. And let's try this. Should fail, and then let's see. Suggest braces around initialization of sub-object. Missing braces. Sure. I think we're getting further than we did last time. We'll see other patch. So this guy is for the trim, but see this should already not be defined. Right? Like if one, it's clearly not being defined because we watched it earlier not function. My poor man's make C or CMake like auto conf system does not find this. So this should not be defined. So this should not be necessary. Because if we look at fuse, if we look at trim, yeah, if defined, have malloc trim. So this function should just be a no-op if that's not defined. So I don't understand why he did this. Let's see what happens. Let's look at the other stuff. Let's see, patch, fuser mount. This one's probably simple enough. Oh, this is... Oh, interesting. This is the same... Is this is used there? If defined, scheduled, and fuser mount. I didn't realize any of those functions were called. Okay, looks like CPU compiled. That's good. Okay, util fuser mount. Let's look at this. Util fuser mount. Schedule. Okay, maybe this shouldn't even be in this function. Because I don't remember any of the scheduling stuff even being called. What is, shit, I don't know what. Let's see. Man, schedule.h, no. Locate, do I have locate? Yes, locate, h.h. What? Clone. Oh, maybe it's because of clone. Does man clone? Yep, that's probably why. But I thought this was already kind of built for BSD in mind. BSD? No. Oh man, I got quite a few people. I didn't. I mean, I noticed a bunch of people followed earlier in the stream, but I didn't realize how many it was. Thank you again for everyone who followed. Thank you. Let's see. Nothing Is clone used? Oh, clone namespace. But this should be probably wrapped, right? Like this shouldn't be BSD compatible. So there's ignore M tab. If not defined, ignore M tab. This is one thing, just like I worked on a number of projects in my career that are multi-platform. I really, really prefer if the code that is different be put into different modules rather than hash pound defined it. It's so much more convenient if I know that all the BSD code is in the BSD module rather than having to search through stuff like this. Interesting. New namespace. Why are they cloning a new? Oh, is mounted. Else. Okay, so else ignore M tab. This is like the simpler part of it. Oh, okay, because this is. Wait, why are they cloning? Why the fuck are they calling clone? I don't know. But this, not this. Let's move this off to the side. Oh, okay. It compiled. Build. libviews. What is it? AR. What do I list? In a while. List the file specified. No. Oh, TV. AR, TV, libviews. Yeah, I mean, that looks, timestamp's a little wrong, but okay. Otherwise, it looks fine. So, why these other patches then? I wonder if it's for like an older version of BSD is having problems. Let's go back to this patch. Because like these aren't even being get affinity, or like this is not even being used here. So I wonder if this is just he was throwing shit at the wall. Okay, we'll leave that one out. Read ahead. Sys macros versus types. Okay, that's actually in mergerfs proper. Sys types. I wonder what it's complaining about. I mean, this kind of stuff is gonna fail unless FreeBSD has like a Linux emulation layer. Let's see. Let's go to sys. Nope, there's no sys. Okay. I think FreeBSD has a Linux emulation layer, but I mean, I guess this will just fail. So I wonder, what about, okay. This is, all these are wrapped. See, what I typically try to do is anything that's like a low-level function, I try to make it so that if it's a cross-platform thing and failure is acceptable, like you can fail gracefully, then I try to move all of the core functions into OS-specific modules. And then I'll have like a high-level header, or I usually use the syntax IPP, like instead of like include, instead of .cpp, like .ipp for include. And then maybe I should do ICPP, whatever. But it the idea is that from there in the header, I'll say, you know, if it's like here where it says like if it's FreeBSD, then I'll include the FreeBSD variants of things, otherwise the Linux variants or whatever. So that way there's just like a high level one that dispatches to the actual business logic. I find that a little bit, I mean, at first it can be a little bit confusing because it's not in the top level file, but so this, I guess there's just no sys macro on, let's see. Come on. Find name sys macros.h and user include. I guess not. But they have types. Yeah. For some reason, I thought the chat moved. I guess not. And all right, so let's just go back here and gmake. We'll see what happens. J4, and we will T the output. T build. Let this go. Let's look at the other patches. Okay, so this and read ahead. Fine. And umount 2. All right, so target and flags. Oh, this is for the lazy unmount feature that I added to mergerfs. So the problem is that you can't remount fuse. So you can't anything that you yourself as the writer of the software do not make dynamically changeable via some other mechanism like some IPC or IOCTL or something. There's no way to do a fuse remount. And there isn't, but people want to be able to like make changes on the fly. So mergerfs does have some runtime configuration stuff, but if you're doing an upgrade, especially, that there's nothing you can do about it, right? You're going to version 1 to 2 or something. So what I included is the ability for it to do a lazy unmount of the target so that the operating system, when there's no longer any active users of the file system underneath, like all new, just like normal, it'll mount on top of the old mount point. And so anything that's new to that point in the file system will start using the new instance. And then the old instance, as things stop using it, then it will eventually get unmounted. And so that's what this is about. So I guess it makes sense that there's no necessarily umount 2. Is there another? Oh, that's interesting. I just typed control alt right, and it did that. Oh, there we go. So let's do man umount 2. Okay, man umount. I want the unmount. Unmount. What was it? Yeah, unmount. Okay. So unmount syspram, sysmount. Okay. And then target and flags. Conster int flags. Mount detach is 0. But do they have lazy unmount? So I think, see, the problem is I don't know what this guy was intending. So he might have just been making a compile and damn the ability for anything to actually work. Which is not what I want, ideally. Or at least I need to clearly list in the documentation that these things are no ops. Require an empty directory for a mount pointer. Oh, I don't think Linux has that. Let's see, lazy. Nope. Detach. Nope. So read only, no exec, no set UID, no atime, snapshot, suid directory, synchronous, mount async. All IO on this file system should be done asynchronously. Force a read-write mount even if the file system appears to be unclean. Disable read clustering, write clustering. Yeah, so it doesn't look like they have the same kind of functionality. Let's see. There we go. Let's look. FreeBSD lazy. Unmount a busy device. Force. He's just telling him why he was busy. No. Forceful. Yeah, I don't want to do a forceful unmount. And it's probably better that it just fails silently, because I think that's probably what I do anyway. All right, so that's not an unreasonable change of behavior. Where this patch? Okay. I guess it can still try to unmount it. It's just probably not likely to succeed. Where is this unmount to CPP? Oh, I'm looking at the wrong file. The fs unmount to CPP. Yeah, so this is a normal situation where I would probably rewrite this stuff to be more generic and then create a dispatching thing where one would go to the BSD variant and one would go. But for now, let's do if def Linux. Do that. Else, is it? Yeah, sif. Well, let's keep it consistent. So before we had if BSD, FreeBSD. So let's do it that way. Else we assume Linux is the default. And if what did he do? If it, error. Well, that is certainly in both of them, so we'll leave that out. But we do include sysparam.h and include sysmount.h. And fine, I'll fix this later. I'll do a define umount to and then right, I have detach, so we'll just define detach 0. And it didn't, none of those other flags look like they were relevant for us. So we do, yeah. So this is what actually gets called, and then it'll just call this guy. This will be unmount, same thing, no flags. It'll fail with a busy. Let's just double check. Go to references. That's not the reference I was looking for. Find definitions, find declarations. I don't know. This never seems to work well for me. I don't know if I need to there's more I need to do, or it just doesn't scan my stuff correctly. But let's see, git grep umount lazy in outright. Okay. Okay, that's simple enough. And then I call from here. And right, I just spit out a warning if it's error unmounting. That's reasonable enough. Okay. So git log, git push. And then let's look at more patches. First, let's look at how it's building. Still going. This takes quite a while on this virtual machine. All right, and we did umount and then preload. Yeah, I mean, preload. What did he have to change? Must be white space issue there or something. If Linux format regular. Oh, really? They don't have that in FreeBSD? That seems unlikely. They don't have, okay, let's, Alt F2. User include grep ifmt. No. They've got this guy as part of, oh, that's part of the file system. That's fine. Oh, how about this? Oh, wait. If define Linux, but it's right here. It's in systat. Oh, damn, it keeps grabbing my mouse. Why? So these I understand, but I don't understand this. Let's try ifreg. Grep ifreg. Yeah, that's there too. And it's in systat. I don't want to have to. There's almost no way that FreeBSD 13 doesn't have those as well. Is there anyone in the crowd know BSD at all? It's just, I mean, I know certain things just are fundamentally different and whatever, but like this seems very unlikely that FreeBSD 13 does not have this. Like the scheduling stuff, maybe I could see set scheduler in BSD, older versions of BSD maybe not being there, but.
Geez, what a bunch of tools.
Hello.
Verturo Ego just followed.
Thank you for the follow. Well, let's see what is. Go back.
Geez, what a bunch of tools.
IWEX7 just followed.
Hello. Thank you for the follow. IWEX7. I wonder. Not very random. I've got like several video clips that play 2 in a row. Twitch needs to be better at their random number generator. Okay, this is taking forever. Let me kill this, git pull, and oh, that's interesting. Why is it doesn't? Okay, do this again. Let this run. So that's all the patches. This, okay, so this should be in systypes. Oh, wait. Wait, what was it? I thought it was in sys. Yeah, it was in systat that these guys are. So systat. These should be there. These certainly, I don't imagine, right? So grep o path. Okay, there's no path. That's not very helpful, but oh, they've got a no path here too. Huh. So why did he comment these out? There's probably no temp file though. That one I'd be surprised. Temp file. Yeah, because they would need opath if they have like open at, right? Like it's a very they kind of go together. Sync, follow, resolve beneath. Path resolution must not cross the file descriptor directory. Yeah, record only the target path in the open descriptor. I mean, unless record only the open at open file reference by file descriptor if path is empty. That's interesting. Let's see. They mentioned it again. Returns a file descriptor that can be used as a directory file descriptor for open at and other system calls. Right, it's the same as Linux. So why would he have to comment that out? I have a hard time believing that this is new to like FreeBSD 14. Yeah, it was wait, open at was FreeBSD 8. So, I mean, desync, whatever. That's interesting. I guess I'm gonna have to email this guy and find out what the reasonings were. Because if I can just get this to build on 14, that'll be good enough for round 1 of stuff. I thought there was a bunch of other things that I'd broke. But maybe over the years I've like reworked some of them and just they're not broken anymore. Dist info. Oh, interesting. It gets packaged with the author name. Yeah, this guy, I'll have to email whoever this is. I see, not for 386. It should compile on i386. GitHub account. Oh, that's interesting. They keep that metadata. Files. Oh, they're only including plist files, post list files. Did they not install the other stuff? Oh, I gotta remake my man file. That reminds me. Now that I have all the new documentation, the man, I don't know that I'm gonna even bother with a man page besides like maybe the most basic of things. Okay. I was trying to find a logo or something for mergerfs. I mean, it's been a decade now, and I still don't have some sort of logo. I was playing around with Grok on x.com, and let's see, did I save them on this machine? Pictures. Yeah. So came up with a few things that I saved that weren't terrible. Is that as zoomed as it gets? Yeah. So, why does it open up in a browser rather than image viewer? It's like, this one's not bad. This one's maybe it was straight on. It might look better. I thought this one was okay. This one was all right. This one's okay. Kind of wanted more lines, but I couldn't get it to create it. This one, maybe too much. I kind of like this, but it created this without putting the like thing in it. So maybe I can use this as a template, but I kind of like the idea of having not tentacles per se, but you know, something that somehow inspires the mind to think of like aggregation of things. I don't know. But the problem is that this icon is so damn small, and as far as I can tell, this is the normal size, at least at my resolution, and it disappears anyway when you zoom in. Like, I guess, you have to zoom in a crazy amount for it to be really visible, so maybe it's better just to leave it. Or maybe I shortened it to MFS or something. Then again, MFS is the name of a theoretical tool that I want to build. For in addition, because if people aren't familiar with Drive Pool on Windows, Drive Pool is like a competitor, so to speak, of mergerfs, but is the way it works is pretty different insofar as instead of giving you options to decide where files should be placed, it will always place them on the file system with the most free space. And then it has kind of on a schedule, I think, but maybe even on demand, it will check to see like certain rules that you've set up, and then it will move stuff around. It'll make duplicates of things. And mostly up to this point, I've told people like, oh, if you want, say, duplication of files, then like use a third-party tool. The problem is there aren't any good third-party tools that do that exactly. And people don't want to write their own. So I think that's kind of on my to-do list, is to create a tool that will watch the file system, and then maybe on either on demand or on a timer or whatever, on events, decide, okay, I'm going to like co-locate files in this directory that follow this FN match or something or at this point in the tree down, I want this to happen. If a file, what I was doing for a while was I'd put a file in a directory, like a hidden file, like dupe _2 or _3, and then I have a small tool that scans over the file system looking for these sigil files, and then if it sees a file from that point down, it will duplicate all the files across the pool. So the idea is, if I make a tool, that's not just some simple Python script I threw together, like some C++ thing, maybe, that will do the same thing, but more bespoke and then integrated with mergerfs. So you could alternately maybe create a file that says, okay, here are all the directories or whatnot, or maybe it just points to, because the plan is to move mergerfs to use like toml files versus like a key value pairs that I use today, because it's just not, it's too many complexities in using key value pairs. I think toml will be a reasonable way to move forward, but it's not as easy as it sounds, because the state of the software is co-located with the config. It really should be called like state as an object, but internally it's called config, and the config can be changed on the fly, which is super convenient, but then it means it's incredibly invasive. And so I need to like slowly, probably, I tried to wholesale replace it, and that just did not work because I have to change too many things. So my idea is maybe to create a config file and then piecemeal move stuff over to use the toml file. Probably the best thing to start with is the branches, because the branches are probably the most complex data structure in the whole config. And then maybe I can use that same format, and then you point the tool to that, and that will allow you to be that'll give you that power to say, like, rather than mergerfs trying to do it live, which a lot of people, like, I had to add this to the documentation somewhere, I think in the FAQ, technical behavior, yeah, this guy. So I had to write this up because so many people don't understand how file systems work, and I think when you like move a file, there's like some file system behavior that is move file from A to B, right? And that's simply not how it works. So I had to write out this because this comes up. I mean, there are times when I'll get this, basically some form of confusion around this, the way file systems work, on almost a weekly basis. Alex, you might want to look into the Hocon config language. The nice thing about it is extremely intuitive. All separators and stuff just work. I'll take a look. Thanks. I'm not really worried about having like a bespoke language, but it would be nice to have something that people were familiar with. But YAML is a nightmare. JSON is a nightmare. Toml has plenty of flaws, but is like INI file-ish enough that I think people just understand it. And there's a good C++ library that I've been used or have used in the past that is not bad to work with for Toml, but I'll take a look at that. You can just type JSON in Hocon and it works too. You can write it in nicer syntax. Yeah, I mean, ultimately the problem that I've had is not really the config language itself, and it's really the integration with mergerfs. I just made it too integrated. Basically, there's effectively every object of note that has state has a to and from string function, and then I put all of those into a map. You know, it's C++, right? So I create a class that has like to and from string, and it's basically a key value pair. And then when you change something at runtime, either through extended attribute file system calls or IOCTL calls, it just takes that string, finds the object that like the key is the object name externally exposed in a map. So I look up the object in the map and then call the object from string or whatever and pass it in. And that works quite well, actually. But then when you move away from something that is as simple as a string to a structured document of some sort, then suddenly you have to consider like, well, are all the details about what I need to do contained within like a subsection of this document, or do I need to pass in the whole document and assume that every object is going to look through it and make the right decision based on the whole of the information? And that becomes complicated. And making things configurable is hard. Yeah, I mean, I'm considering getting rid of runtime configurability altogether. I really would like not to, but when you've got, I mean, I can just show you, right? Like this, like there's more than a page of configurable options, and all of these, like, yeah, some of them are Boolean, some of them are integer, some of them are enumerated values, right? Like, as soon as you get past enumerated values, it becomes increasingly more like complicated, and the like being able to pass in just a string is fine for when it is those more simple data types. But when what I would like to do, if I bring up just whatever, like Scratch, like what I really want to do is have the ability to, like, if I use whatever, like an INI style or Toml style, like I want to be able to say, okay, I want to define my branches, and this is like an array, and in my branches I want to have like whatever, like branch 1 is foo and branch 2 is bar. Like I think I need to name them maybe, but I want to be able to say things like well, I mean, min free space is a config, right? So at 1 gig, right? So this tells the policy that if this branch has less than a gig free, I want to exclude it from the computation. Or if I have mode equals read only, then I want to skip this if it's a create function. But I would like to be able to add exceptions, right? So if you're using certain file systems that are not POSIX compliant, I kind of want to have I don't know, like if it's a VFAT, maybe I want to say type equals VFAT or something, so that when it does certain commands on this file system, it knows that the user wants to behave in a certain way or whatever. Or there's some other stuff that I'm kind of blanking on right now, but you can imagine where this could also be, right, foobar equals x equals 1 and y equals 2, right? It could get increasingly complex, and this is where this becomes difficult. And then how hierarchical do you make it? When do you pass things in? This just becomes a mess. And so that's much easier to do at the top level when you're just starting the program rather than later. And so I've already done this attempt like 2 or 3 times, and each time I kind of get really far and it's super invasive and not backwards compatible. And I'm not afraid of not being backwards compatible per se, but it gets to be a change that's so large that it's unwieldy, and then I lose my motivation to work on it, and then I end up with like 5 different instances over vacations that I've tried to do something like this, and it doesn't pan out entirely. So that's why I'm thinking maybe if I move to something where it's instead you say config equals path to config.toml or whatever, it's smart enough to like pick up certain details from there, and then everywhere else you do key equals value in the command line, or in right now I actually support like INI files, and it's just key value pairs. That's actually what I do. I think I might be the only person that does this, but do I show it in quick start? Yeah, I think I did. Maybe not. Where did... Oh, here. Yeah, with a config file. So I create like for me personally, I prefer this method. So what I do is I create a bunch of symlinks in like /etc in a directory that just point to all my branches, and then I use the file system symlinks as pointing to all the drives. This keeps the fstab file small and readable, and then I just point to the config file, and in the config file it supports pretty much everything that the command line does. So then I just do the same thing there, and then I create these symlinks. I do need to make a slight modification where if the symlink doesn't resolve, I'm pretty sure it just ignores it, which is probably not ideal. It probably should just use the literal value instead of trying to resolve it, because what it tries to always resolve down, so it's not following symlinks, because mergerfs currently does not use opath like openat, and mergerfs 3 probably will. It's better for performance, and it allows you to like bind mount on top of an existing file system in a way that I can't do today because I use full paths and just traditional file IO. But like 12 years ago when I started mergerfs, not every file system or not every operating system had openat, because that was only 2008, I think, when that came out. POSIX 2008. It was 2008, right? Yeah, 2008. So, right, like 12 years ago, there were still some operating systems that didn't support this, so I didn't either. But now that would probably be better, where the each branch, when it starts, it opens the file descriptor to the the path would be like mount foo, and I would just open that, keep that file descriptor open all the time, and that would improve performance so ever so slightly, because it doesn't have to do the go through the file system every time to mount and then foo till it gets to the actual file system. And then also it would allow me to like bind mount mergerfs on top of, like, if you change foo later, or you could put mergerfs as the root file system or something probably, and then still use the underlying file system, because I would, before the mount completed, I would open it, right? So from the app's perspective, it would still be the underlying file system. So anyway, thanks again, Alex. I'll take a look at that. Let me just, what was it called? Hocon. Right, that's what it was. Big. Sponge. Hocon. Human optimized config object notation. Comes from the Java world. That gives me the heebie-jeebies to begin with. At least I saw a mention of Akka. All right, whatever. I'll take a look later. All right, thank you. Let's see. Parse and C. We use Flex and Bison to scan and parse files for strings. And a CJSON object. It's missing a couple features, but value joint. Not sure what that means. All right, I'll take a look. All right, let's check on the build process. And okay, it failed here. Oh, I thought wait a minute, I thought I had I've been using it for a few projects and it works great. All right, yeah, thanks. I'll see how it compares to Toml. I mean, real quick, I mean, what is it about other things that, is it just the syntax? Is it the integration that you found easier? Did I? Oh, I forgot to put it here. Well, that explains it. Okay, let's go back to the files, read ahead. Right types. If def FreeBSD include systypes. And what was I doing? Oh yeah, right. So this is mostly just setting of files. This is another like super hacky thing that I do in mergerfs, because to make things easier for people. Because if you're using page caching, you will be limited by whatever the smallest value is set for read ahead. And the only way to set it is by setting it via this pseudo file system path in Linux. You would think there'd be a read ahead. Well, I guess there is a read ahead. Isn't there a read ahead syscall? But yeah, this isn't the same, right? So this isn't setting. This is for a file, but this doesn't apply to a file system, and so you have to set it at the file system level. And Fuse will be limited if you're using page caching. What happens is you never really are reading from the Fuse file system directly. You're hitting page cache. Page cache throws exemption, whatever, because it's not in the page cache. Then the kernel is asynchronously dispatching reads to Fuse, filling the page cache, and then the application can continue running. And as a result of the read ahead on a file system being by default, I think 128K in most systems, even if you set so Fuse can handle at the moment, though I think in 6.13 they're making this so it's configurable by the OS maintainer. It's like a sysctl. But Fuse has a maximum of, was it 256 pages at 4K a page. So you're hitting 1 megabyte worth of data. It's actually 1 meg plus 1 page. That's the largest payload you can have between the kernel and the Fuse server. And so if you set the size of the message to be 1 meg, but you're using page caching on a file, but the read ahead is 128K, you will never actually get a read request of more than 128K. And that can, because of the higher latencies involved in going, especially with a union file system like mergerfs, where if this was like in memory or if it was, network file system or something, it would be in the wash. But what happens is, the client app makes a request to the kernel then makes a request to the VFS, through the VFS is Fuse is like, okay, then I got to talk to the userland program, so it sends the message to the userland. Then I have to interpret that into a bunch of syscalls, which then have to go back into the kernel, and then who the hell knows what's happening on that side. Then I get the data back, and right, so there's all these extra hops. And the larger the payload per message, the lower the overhead is overall, and the better throughput generally. So since the only damn way to set it file system wide is through this /sys sudo file system, then I just incorporated it as a command in mergerfs. And so if you set this to 1 meg, it sets its own, it looks up itself. That's what it's doing here. So you give it the path, it basically lstats itself to get its device values, and then gets the major and minor, and that has to be used here. And then there's a pseudo file that you can write into, and that's what I'm doing here, and you can set it in kilobytes. So it's this big roundabout thing, and the problem is I'm also having to do this when I'm still mounting, and so it's all blocked. And so what I have to do is I spawn a temporary thread, I disown the thread effectively, and then it goes and does this. Because if I did not spawn a separate thread, it would block while it's trying to mount. It would block doing this and then deadlock. So instead what happens is Fuse finishes mounting and this thread is blocked until that occurs, and then so at the end it sets it. It's a little ugly, but it works. So there's I suppose I could have like a function in another thread that waits for it to mount and then do it, but in fact this is way better. It's, you start a thread for one purpose, but whatevs. It's the syntax mainly. The user can write like anything in the config, and it just magically makes it work, because there's many different kinds to do things in syntax. Yeah, okay. That does make me a little nervous, but I'll see what it means in practice. Because one of my biggest problems with config languages like YAML has been how loosey-goosey they are, and when there's too much magic going on, like with YAML, and I've seen this at enterprise scale. It's like, oh, okay, the YAML parser for this language understands this file, but now we just migrated to another language with a different parser, and now it doesn't work. Or like parser A for this language is deprecated, no one uses it anymore, it's not supported by the original developer, so we're going to migrate to using this other one, and then it also has similar problems. Hello, OnkX. Good evening. So I'm always nervous about languages that have too much magic in them, or too much flexibility. But again, the language itself is really not the problem. It's how invasive I built mergerfs into the config, into the stuff, and did it all myself. So, all right. So this should work. Let's just git push this. We'll try to rebuild git pull. and make it really, I think, should not be printing that slowly. A little unnerving. Okay, so the extended attributes are disabled. Interesting is let's check the been a while since I saw you stream. Been very busy lately. Well, I haven't streamed in a while. So I got kicked off, or I got suspended from Twitch for a month because I have I have 3 channels. Like there's this channel. I have the Computer Chronicles classic computing and programming channel. That's like the 24/7 jobby, right? That I have. Twitch TV. Computer Chronicles. Is it running? It should be. Yeah. No one's watching it, but it's running. And then I have my Temple OS 24/7 stream. Well, I was trying to censor, Terry Davis's videos. Clearly, I failed at that, and then someone reported the channel. And because all the channels are connected, I lost all 3 channels for a month. Thankfully, it was not permanent. So between beginning of December until just a few days ago, well, what's today? Okay, maybe a week ago. I'm losing track of time already. I was not able to do anything with Twitch. So there was that, but I was also on vacation. So I spent most of December, the beginning of December I got promoted, and it was kind of a big deal. I work at Morgan Stanley, and Morgan Stanley has, like a lot of companies, they have a kind of distinguished engineer program, and I got promoted to a distinguished engineer position, and they flew us out to New York, which is where I used to live, for a week to do an on-site, like the week after the promotion. And so I kind of had to scramble and spent the first week of, the beginning of December, I was still in visiting my parents for Thanksgiving break. And then I got promoted while I was in visiting them. And then I came home to Austin, spent a few days here, flew out to New York for a week, and then came back for a few days, and then went to my in-laws for Christmas, holidays, till like a day or two before New Year. And then, of course, New Year was on a Wednesday. So I took off the end of February or end of December, and then was back in the office for a couple days. But then there was President Carter died, so we had off on the 9th because of that, and then the 8th was comp day, where once a year in early January they have comp day. This is pretty common in fintech. There's just a single day where they have a big party, so to speak, and all the promotions and stuff typically happen on that day. The distinguished engineer part is different, but that's why it happened earlier in the year. But typically it's and this year was on the 8th, so the 8th was a wash, the 9th was a wash, so this is going to be the first real week back. I am actually, there's no way in hell I'll ever be CEO, but what is it? So I report to, my manager reports to a guy who I think reports to the CEO. So I'm only three away from the CEO, which is not bad. But there's a lot of people at the company, right? There's probably a lot of people in that kind of position. But it's yeah. But I'm still doing the same stuff, right? It's largely a ceremonial title. So I do have more work, but it's largely ceremonial. It means that random people. Do I still code? I haven't coded in a while, really. It has nothing to do with this promotion. My team's pretty small. It's only I've in the past, when I was much more junior. I had much larger teams, but at the moment so I run a machine learning research division of the technology side of the machine learning research division of Morgan Stanley. So we're like a central team that focuses on, as the name suggests, machine learning research. So most of the team are like PhDs with a background in something related to machine learning, right? Statistics or machine learning straight up or what have you. And they all report primarily to my manager, who comes from that space. And so very academic. We publish papers. If you're in the machine learning space at all, then there are people in my team that plausibly you've heard of. It's a good team of people. And there's like 20, I think we're hiring a few more people. So there's like 20 to 20 odd researchers, I think, in the team. The one guy just said he's leaving, but whatever, normal churn. But I think there's like 20 odd researchers. And then there's my team on the technology side. And in that team, there's only 4 of us at the moment. I've got a young guy starting in February. And so there'll be 5 of us. And then there's like one other person that I work with closely in the team that helps deal with like bureaucratic stuff and kind of product management and whatnot. And just I'm very busy. So the role of my team is to both be hands-on with the researchers so that literally just tech support, but all the way up through productionizing of services. And so we are taking their terrible researcher code, converting it into something that is somewhat reasonable to put into production. And then usually we hand it off to a business division. So we don't own most of what we do. We're more like contractors and SMEs. So teams will come to us and say, like, we have this idea. We have all this data. What can we do with the data? We have time series information, or we have anomalies or whatever, and we want to do something with it. What's the latest in the field for this stuff? And we give them advice. And if there's something valuable there, and they don't have the resources in their team, then we act as their contractors effectively. And so we do give them like white glove treatment, and the researchers will build the models. We will help the researchers make it something that's productionizable. And then hopefully we hand it off to the business unit. And that business unit could be technology. It could be HR. It could be, high frequency trading. It could be fixed income. It could be anybody. And so there's 3 guys working for me now. And I've got a couple people, one in New York and a couple in Montreal. This new guy I'm getting is going to be out in Montreal too. And they are the primarily hands-on keyboard. The other responsibility that our team has is dealing with the strategic kind of technology for the firm. Now, it's not that my team owns any of that stuff, but we are the SMEs. And so I am on vendor calls to say whether or not stuff is bullshit. I'm talking with, I used to be in infrastructure. So my background is like OS is like not sysadmin stuff, but like that's, I know that stuff too. But, obviously file systems are kind of in my MO. I used to do distributed platforms, mostly orchestration, like enterprise-wide software orchestration. It's very low level stuff. I helped build container platforms before Kubernetes came out, right? So for instance, Morgan Stanley has this software called Morgan Stanley, can't spell, treadmill. So I helped build and design this project years ago. Unfortunately, we were going to spin this off as a company, and then that kind of fell through the cracks. But in a different timeline, probably a many millionaire who was a core developer on Treadmill when we IPO'd, 10, 15 years ago, whenever it was. But unfortunately, that is not what happened. And so I use all my connections with those people to help push strategy at the firm. So, all this AI ML stuff takes a lot of compute. GPUs are very popular in that space as a solution for that compute. NVIDIA, AMD, what have you. And sociopath
just followed.
Thank you for the follow. the banks. So it requires a little bit of a story time. Hello. Wine Duke boy. So it requires a little bit of a story. Nowadays, people talk about Fang, right, and all the cool stuff in theory is happening at these Fang companies. But in the 80s and 90s, it was not uncommon for certain banks to be the place that you wanted to go if you wanted really challenging problems to solve, because it was only the banks that had the requirements for reliability and scale. I mean, unless maybe you're working for, government contractors or government themselves, maybe, or what have you. But Morgan Stanley was very much ahead of the curve from a technology perspective, even among its peers. And so we were doing things very much ahead of the curve.
Sociopath chick just redeemed stretch.
Stretch. Yeah, it has been how long? 3 hours, I think. Yeah, so I probably do need a stretch. But so Morgan Stanley was like a very technical place to oh, and thank you for the oh, okay. Yeah, no one, I don't, Sociopath Chick, I don't think anyone's ever redeemed anything. I think you might be the first person to redeem something, or maybe the second. It certainly hasn't been many. But thank you. Yeah, so Morgan Stanley was like a very technical place to work, and that has its downsides, in that you have all this technical debt that is still very cool technology, but no one's using anymore. So it's kind of hard to hire people and get them up to speed quickly. So we're going through this massive, as of many banks are going through this massive modernization thing. And I was kind of the forefront of some of that, insofar as like I was working in an orchestration and containers. I added container technologies to my internal products. And by that, I mean, like, I was working on orchestration platforms. So where it's not like I'm not using containers, I'm building things to use container technologies at a low level. So I added that before to my product before Treadmill came out, before Kubernetes came out, maybe around when Docker was getting its legs, or LXC maybe. And because I like bridge that world of like the old world and the new world, I use a lot of these technologies at home. I helped bring Docker into the firm to a degree, and have been constantly pushing any team I'm in to leverage these technologies rather than the old technologies, to be a good citizen and not try to incorporate known tech debt into a new architecture or something. And so and I did that for 15 years, or give or take. I forget how long it was, 2005 to like 2020. Yeah, so about 15 years. Well, at least at Morgan Stanley. And so before that, I was doing high frequency trading stuff. But those connections are super valuable, because the people who work on machine learning don't talk, like, they're too high level. Like, they do programming, but they're not programmers generally. Like, yeah, a lot of these platforms are written in C, C++, Rust, whatever. But those are the exceptions. The rule is that most people are like data scientists or PhDs in machine learning, and they have no fucking clue how to program, right? And so if you're they don't know how to articulate their needs particularly well to the guys who are at the bottom of the tech stack, who need to create the infrastructure to provide, high levels of data storage and versioning, right? Because you can imagine yourself, you have like terabytes worth of data to train a model, like a large language model, and you need to be able to version that data over time. Like, that is not a trivial problem to solve, and you really need the storage experts involved. But the storage experts are so removed from the needs of these people that there's just a gap there, and I've been filling that gap. And so I've been trying to get whatever Python team to help better support things that are relevant to the machine learning space. And where, if you look at something like, my God, it's so annoying. Was it PyG lib? Right, this library is pretty commonly used in a lot of projects, but you have this multiplication problem where you have different versions of PyTorch, different versions of CUDA and operating systems, right? So you've got this like three-dimensional grid, and you have to support all of these, and they all have to be compiled because they're all native compiled languages under the covers. And so how the fuck do you deal with this, especially when these guys who build these libraries, is this the page? Yeah, like these are all the different permutations, right? Different versions of Torch for different versions of the computational backend, and then also for different versions of Python, and for different OSs. So, right, so Python version, OS version, Torch version, backend. So yeah, sorry, there's 4 different things that you have to worry about. And this doesn't work with Artifactory, which we use Artifactory at Morgan Stanley for an artifact store. And so you like solving this problem. How do you solve the problem of storing large amounts of data? Well, there's tools like DVC, which is open source. Combinational explosion. Yeah, and the worst part of it, Windu boy. Sorry, I don't know how you pronounce your name, but the it's not just that combinational problem, but it's also the fact that when they build those packages, I don't know if you know Wind Up Boy. Okay. I don't know how much you know about Python, but the wheel files have metadata in them, right? And it's toml file or whatever nowadays, and it has like metadata about the package. Well, when you ingest that wheel file, it's also ultimately just a zip. When you ingest that, and then the Artifactory program ingests it, looks at the metadata. If the name of the wheel file, like the literal name of the file, does not match the metadata, it has a conniption fit. And of course, these guys who write these packages, what they want you to be able to do is just have a dependency on like pyglib. But if you do that and everything's named pyglib, then the pyglib so the platform doesn't matter so much, right? So insofar as like whether it's Python version or the operating system, those are handled by pip. What's not handled is the fact that there's an ad. Did I miss noticing an ad? Sorry. I don't have a today kind of thing. It's but we were working on FreeBSD for porting my file system to FreeBSD again. It used to be supported. It has not been lately. But so you ingest these wheel files into Artifactory, and it's for whatever the AMD version of the AMD accelerated version of it for Linux, and then you want the NVIDIA accelerated version for CUDA version 1.2.3.4. Well, tough shit. Artifactory says, no, I've already got pyglib for Python 3.11 for Windows or whatever. And that's where it's bad. And there's just not a good solution that I'm aware of to fix this. What some projects have done, like PyTorch, is they default to the CUDA version, and CUDA is generally backwards compatible, so it's not so bad. But they include the CPU version and the NVIDIA version. But if you're using anything else than that, then it becomes a pain in the ass. But anyway, like trying to work with the infrastructure package management people on solving that kind of shit. Getting GPUs on-prem is like its whole deal, right? Like, if you know anything about data centers, a data center rack only has a certain amount of cooling and electrical capacity. And so if you're talking about, I don't know. Again, I don't know how much you guys pay attention to this shit, but the Dell XE9680, power consumption is the first fucking thing that comes up, because this thing is a beast, right? This thing is a fucking beast. And supposedly I'm going to be getting 1 or 2 of these machines, one with Intel Gaudi GPUs. It can handle 8 of these, and one with AMD MI300 based setup. And I have nowhere to put them because they consume so much fucking power. Like I don't think it gives you like a full out number here, but this is one power supply, 2,800 watts. Does it say how many it needs? Like, if I remember right, on the NVIDIA variant of this machine, you need like 1,200 watts worth of power supplies for one. I think it's a 4U machine. Is it 4 or 5 or 6U? I forget. Yeah, so you can have 8 H100s, NVIDIA H100s. You have 8 H200s, 8 AMD Instinct MI300Xs, or 8 Intel Gaudi 3s. So I'm trying to convince Intel and Dell to give us a seed machine for both of these latter two. Because we are primarily an NVIDIA shop, so I'm trying to get my researchers to just kick the tires on different kinds of systems. But and you know, if you don't know what a seed program is, it's a way where the companies will like loan companies like Morgan Stanley or whomever a machine for an extended period of time, usually, so that they can have a lower risk of, right, like, you know, seeding them in the sense of like, oh, here's a sample, right, and hopefully they end up buying it. I recently writing Python and Anger professionally again for the first time since 2004. Oh, a lot of has happened since 2004. Arguably in the better, but yeah, it's still a terrible ecosystem. Power is more expensive than bandwidth. Oh, yeah, for sure. So, I mean, we've got, I think our data centers maybe, that's pretty standard. Like, is it like 15 kilowatts or 11 kilowatts per rack or something? And if this machine takes like 10 kilowatts at load, right? Like I can put one of these maybe in a rack in our data centers. And in our labs on-prem, where we do like all of our experimentation with new hardware and prep it for certification and stuff, those I think are those are like 5 kilowatts. So we'd have to like take 3 racks, and these, I mean, they're low power, but they're still normal, physically normal racks. So you still got a normal, whatever it is, 44U rack. You're gonna have to leave 3 of them to just put this one damn server in it, and that's not gonna, like, the innovation lab team that manages like all that stuff is not going to be or the lab is not going to be happy if I'm consuming 3 racks for one machine. So they're supposed to be building it. So I'm working with the lab team to create, I mean, they wanted to do this anyway, but I'm like helping them make the argument for it, to build out a row of high density racks that are going to have like 40 or 50 kilowatts per rack, I think. So we could put a few of these machines in each rack. And then, you know, we have to figure out our long-term data center strategy. So that's, you know, back to programming. That's where I'm spending a lot of my cycles is talking to high-level brass on multi-million-dollar build outs of things. Now, I'm not responsible for any of those things, but again, I'm like in the central machine learning team. So I am the go-to person who is like, okay, if you're on the business side and you need compute and you can't get through to the infrastructure teams, then you come to me. If you're on the infrastructure teams and you're trying to verify that the business is demanding something that makes sense, you come to me or my team. So I'm very much like in the middle of it all. And so long story short, yeah, I don't do a lot of programming. I'm hoping that this year will be, I'll have more time on keyboard, but the reality is that, you know, it's tough. I really need to build out my team, but because my team is technically a cost center and we hand off a lot of the things that we do, it's like an awkward situation. Like to get more headcount and to get like better salaries or bonuses for our people, we have to make it so that we have to make money for other teams, but we never make money directly. We make a product, we give it to another team, and then they make the money, and then we got to hold that over their head. And so the whole game, like there's a certain bureaucratic game that has to be played that's a little complicated there. And this team is still somewhat young. Everyone likes us, which is good, but we still have to get like big projects out the door and actually make money, right? Like that's what we're there for. And there was a little bit of growing pains because a lot of the researchers come from academia. So getting them to try to write clean code, not clean code, but just clean code that's ready to go to production in some form is non-trivial. They're not programmers by trade, so I don't hold it against them. But the reality is that it's like having a bunch of junior people. It's worse than having a bunch of junior developers, right? Like straight out of school, because they don't even know what Git is. They don't know what source control is. They are spoiled, right? They have all these high level concepts that are given to them, but when it comes to productionization, you have to care about these things. Like one of the biggest problems that I had to deal with last year was the team would be like, oh, well, I don't have to talk to, and my name's Antonio's team, Trap Exit's team, because I'm just doing research and like I'm working with the business, but like I don't have to talk to the tech team because we're not near production yet. And then they would go and do a model, and they would do like they would create like this pipeline, right? This ETL pipeline. Okay, every day we get a data dump, and then we run some model against it, and we run some computations. We generate a model. That model is consumed by like the thing that's actually making the prediction, and does the inference on the fly during the day, and then at night it dumps another set of data, and we run a training job, and then the next day they pick up a new model, right? And it's a very standard workflow for a lot of projects. And the problem was that they would come to us in the 11th hour and say, oh, the client's ready to go to production, here's the code. Like, well, you're telling me you need GPUs for production inference because this is like a large language model or something. And like, oh yeah, but we don't have GPUs in production. The client doesn't have GPUs in production. Like, what are you gonna do? Like, oh shit. And then they have to go back to the drawing board and like re-engineer their model, because they need it to run on CPU or something. And yeah, I'm trying to get that habit kicked by the research. No, not my researchers, but my team's researchers. There's a lot of growing pains, but we're making progress. Man, this I wonder if this is like simulated and running in a non-accelerated virtual machine, because this should not take this long to build. Well, is what it is. Yeah. So, but it's a fun space, but I unfortunately don't get to code much. But hopefully this year, maybe that'll change. But even so, it'll be Python mostly. So it won't be that fun. Sorry to all the Python folks. All right, so I think let's just make sure that this guy is still building. Clean. I remember in college, I introduced a lot of my college buddies, like in 1990, late 90s. I introduced my college buddies to Linux, and they all got obsessed with Linux, and they spent a lot of time in the command line and building kernels and stuff. And a lot of the non-computer science folks that we were friends with, they'd be like, well, what the hell's going on your computer? And they would just see compiling of code all the time. And okay, compiled, that's good. And so from their perspective, Linux was just this like text flowing all day, every day. That's what their understanding of Linux was. They didn't understand like how Linux was actually usable in any form, because it just seemed like just stuff flowing by the screen all the time. All right, so this looks okay. Let's do a git diff master. Okay, this up. Read it. Let me fix that. Damn it. trailing. Okay. U-mount. Okay, all these seem fine, and FreeBSD should be fine. It should all work on Linux fine. Now, I still have to email this guy and figure out why he made some of these other patches that did not seem necessary. But otherwise, I think FreeBSD might be supported again. And I'll probably be putting out a release soon. I've been working on moving some C code to C++, mostly because I am, since I've already vendored libfuse, I'm kind of like removing layers of abstraction, and I prefer to just have C++ more uniformly available, mostly because basic data structures in C can be a pain at times. And not that I'm not already using them, like I was earlier playing with, what is it? Source hash. So one of the problems that I have to solve, I was mentioning this earlier in the stream, is that I need to be able to deduplicate, what's it called? Fuse reader sequential. So, you read a directory, you have to read the same directory, the same relative directory across multiple paths. Well, many people don't realize this, but in Unix, you can actually have duplicate files of the same name. Now, it doesn't really shouldn't, but the kernel doesn't, the kernel is not inspecting this kind of thing, which is not really surprising, right? Like to confirm that the number of the files, right? Like if you're looking at these files and there's really no reason, given the APIs, if you're familiar with Unix or POSIX APIs for file systems, that you couldn't have multiple files in the same directory called makefile. The thing is that unlike, say, and this is kind of a obscure reference, but OpenVMS, for anyone who's old enough to remember or have played with OpenVMS, they have versioned files, and it's been a while, but if I remember right, you could like reference old versions. So let's say makefile here, that would be the current version, but you could access the old version by doing like whatever, I forget what the commands were on VMS, but you would say makefile hash and like a number, and that would magically be translated to the older version 5 of that file. And I think there might have been like a file system for certain source control systems on Linux that did similar. Maybe Perforce. It's been a very long time since I used Perforce, but maybe I think they might have done something similar. And so what do you do in mergerfs when you, in a union file system, when you need to list out, like, let's say you have makefile on multiple branches that are all, the same relative path. So I dedupe them instead of presenting them, because I think most people that's how they want it to be, and so, right, like what I do here is, you can see it's very simplistic, right? Like for every branch, open the directory, and then just read over it. But the thing is, I need to deduplicate. And so what I do is I have this hash map. It's really a set. And then I just insert the name. And in this case, the API is that if it returns non-zero, that it means it was inserted. If it returns 0, that it means it was already there, not inserted. And so I just check to see if it was inserted. And if it was, then I just loop, I continue the loop. Otherwise, then I go and do some calculations, because I want to know, this is probably something I might be able to get rid of and improve performance slightly. I need to investigate a little bit more, but because this is optional, if you look at reader, I think, I don't know that like inode is actually required here, and like, yeah, type is not always supported. do I set type? Maybe or no, the type comes from when I read the thing, but then I override the inode to make it consistent. I'm not even sure I need to set that, but the problem is that, like, right, software is completely open-ended, so people can write software that does all kinds of funky shit. And if you don't have, I mean, type is definitionally not supported by all file systems, but I think some Durant structures also have different values, and depending on the OS. And so maybe like name is the only thing that's consistent across files implementations. In any case, right, like if the name's already been seen before, skip it. So this is, you could imagine that a hash map, it could be a little expensive because you're talking about possibly 100,000 plus files in a set of directories. And so you want this whole process to be as quick as can be. And so it's really not a micro optimization to try to make sure that like this is as cheap as possible. And so that's why I was looking at like this heat map of different benchmarks for different hash tables in C++. And I'd never, or until like a year ago, I'd never heard of this Verstable. But the performance is pretty good. But before I was using, or I am using currently Khash, and I need to probably just do some benchmarks. But like insertion of a non-existing key of a 64-bit integer is super cheap, is the baseline for this dictionary, or 16-bit. It's even, right, like here, 16 character, which would be 16 character. Right, so like, yeah, 16 character key, 64-bit value. So like probably if you make a set where it's both 64-bit values, this is probably representative of what this mlib can do. So I need to like consider maybe this guy for my set, because even Khash, it's like it's a mixed bag between Verstable, but I was playing around with Verstable, but I need to write some benchmarks to see if it's actually material here, because it's just a one-time thing. You're just creating, you're never removing, you're just deleting the whole thing at the end. So there's probably just some architectural differences here, because I mean, if you look on, like, iteration is atrocious for this guy, but looking up and insertion of non-existing do they have insertion of existing or just lookup? Yeah, just look up for existing and non-existing. So it's just look up for, and then look up non-existing. Okay, so actually maybe I don't want to look at, so this is the trade-off, right? Like, how much duplication do you expect? So if look up non-existing, so if insertion is cheap of non-existing, but it doesn't, the problem is that every hash table is a little bit different in behavior, where you don't know necessarily like what the API is. And so whether you not, because in Khash, when you insert, you will be told on the insert whether or not it exists, like it already existed or not, or if you overwrote what was there. Whereas in Verstable, it does not do that. You have to look at the size of the map before and after to see if it actually added something. But if you look here, right, like the non-existing lookup is the baseline. And so if you're inserting and it doesn't exist, then you've got a good baseline for dict and an okay baseline for stable. But if you're looking up non-existing, then like for stable is the baseline and CC. So it's, it's kind of hard to pick, and maybe it's a wash in the end, but I don't know. Look up. Maybe I just need to talk to the author of Verstable, who created this. Maybe he has a better sense of things. Because you should expect very few collisions. So, I mean, I guess what it means is like in this case, if you're doing an insert and it overwrites, then like, so you check the size before and after. If it's different, then you know you've inserted it, and so you can return that to indicate that you want to skip. But the insert is still going to be this like not as performant. But if the insertion does not overwrite, or wait, insert non-existing, erase non-existing. Yeah, so if the lookup and it exists is this guy, then for anything that's duplicated a lot, then this performance would be better. But again, it kind of depends on how it does all this. Lookup existing. The lookup non-existing is expensive. So if you expected a lot of duplication and you're doing, but you shouldn't be doing lookups, you should be doing inserts. So yeah, anyway, I'm rambling at this point, but it's difficult to pick when these things are very close. But the idea was just try to remove this as being a costly part of this function. Then again, the whole thing is very costly. But when people want to run this on routers, you gotta pinch your pennies, so to speak, in terms of memory and consumption, which is why I don't default to like fuse, reader, what is it? Yeah, core, concurrent, open and read. So like this guy, there's a thread pool and it's dispatching to that thread pool the responsibility for doing the read dir. So and then it has to concurrent read dir. So it concurrently is dispatching both the opens and the reading to multiple threads, which means that it's like a map reduce, right? So the reduce, you don't care about the order per se. Like there's no guarantee in a file system of the order of the files. Like you could read it over and over again and get different ordering, which is why ls by default sorts things, because otherwise, if some program is reading and writing files into a directory, then there's no guarantee of the ordering, and so you could ls and then get a completely different order every time, and that would be unpleasant for people. So ls typically will, for implementations, always sort. But the thing is that some software will call read dir, and maybe they're constantly doing read dir and they don't sort. They're expecting it to be pretty stable generally. And in those cases, if someone's using that kind of software, then you want to use the other implementation, which is instead of COR, concurrent open and read, it's COSR, concurrent open sequential read. So it dispatches opens to the thread pool, and then in the same order I wait on the promise, and then so I put all the promises in the same order that they were dispatched into a vector, and then go through the vector and wait on each of the promises, and then do the read dir there. It's still pretty damn performant, because when you open the directory, it's anticipating, like the kernel will start doing kind of a read ahead. And so in some ways, it's just about as fast as the fully concurrent model of doing that. But yeah, so this is where I first added like a thread pool into mergerfs, because the problem is people have like these giant pools of disk drives where the drives go to sleep, and so it can take multiple seconds for a drive to spin up. So imagine you have 10 drives, they're all asleep, and it takes like 2 to 3 seconds to spin up each one, and you do an ls in a directory in mergerfs. Well, it'll issue a request to the operating system for file system A, and then file system A is on a drive that's asleep, so then the file system has to wait for the drive to spin up and then query the data. And then I query the data, I consume it and aggregate it, and then I send a request after that, if it's fully sequential to B, and then the whole thing happens again. So that's, another 3 seconds and another 3 seconds. And so you're like waiting 30 seconds for the whole pool to start up. Now, maybe you want that because maybe you don't want, maybe your power supply is not good enough to handle that power spike. Now, if that's the case, then you probably have bigger problems, but there might be a reason for that. And it also consumes more memory, right? Like if you're dispatching all these requests at the same time and then aggregating it all together at the same time, you have a higher potential memory upper bound than if you do it sequentially. So for that reason, I provide lots of flexibility here. And networking file systems too also have, right? They have their high latencies, and that can be similarly a problem where if you do it concurrently, it hides it, right? Because you're only as slow as your slowest one rather than the aggregate of all of them. Still compiling. I did not anticipate. I got to double check. Like clearly, the virtual machine is probably running in not on the host, because it really should take a minute or two at most to compile. But it looks like I more or less finished this. So let's just clean up. So what time is it? It's almost 6 o'clock. So I need to log off soon and grab something to eat before I do Sunday gaming with family. Let's do git rebase master, and we will fix up and reword. Patch. No. Improve FreeBSD compatibility. First draft. Need to investigate why upstream patches include certain functions that appear to exist in FreeBSD. What is this, 14.2? The hell did I download? Yeah, 14.2. And then actually while I'm maybe I'll do it as a separate commit. Since we know now that BSD supports mergerfs, let's update the docs. So mergerfs, mk docs, setup, docs, setup, installation. Let's do FreeBSD. Oops. Do this. I wish there was a markdown that just allowed you to use, like it just assumed the same path, the same URL when you're doing this. Let's make sure that this looks right. So make docs serve. Oh, right. I guess on my other machine, I think I installed it system-wide. Python 3. And maybe I should just make this a script. Come on, Python, you can do it. Okay. MK docs serve. Installation. FreeBSD. All right. Well, I guess I'm trying to stream patches, but that doesn't really matter much. So let's just do I guess package install mergerfs. I think that's it, right? Or maybe let's package. Oh, add the package. Run one of these commands. Oh, interesting. Okay. Oh, copy. Let's do that. I guess that's more or less it. Do I say anything else? I mean, I suppose I could build static binaries for FreeBSD too, but if it's already in the port system, then why bother? And then, oh yeah, so okay, so maybe that might be why some of the patches. So they are supporting it on BSD 13 still. I wonder why it should compile on all these architectures. Maybe they just don't have familiarity with it. All right, on 15 as well. All right, so I don't really put much else there. And then let's look at build. Generic. Maybe let's call this generic Linux and do FreeBSD. Let's see. Why do I need Python? I shouldn't need, that might be left over from something. I don't think I need Python anymore, but let's say gmake, GCC, or Clang, gmake, Python. Yeah, I really don't think I need Python, but I'm not going to uninstall Python just to try to test that, do I? Git grep Python. I wouldn't be. Oh, I do have some tools that use Python. That's right. Fine, whatever. And then, oh, do I have build tools? Build tools. I have this less install. Do I have FreeBSD? APK. Oh yeah. Oh, this is old. Oh man, I gotta upgrade this script. This is something I always hated about a lot of software, is that you didn't know what the hell you needed to install on your operating system to get it to build. So I just, for my own purposes at least, I started putting in this script, which actually makes it a lot nicer. I do something similar for our build containers, when I build out packages, and I just try to put everything into a script that'll determine what operating system it is and then install all the necessary stuff. And I think some of this might need to be cleaned up, like this. I think this is intended for BSD. Let me check. Oh, it finished. Nice. mergerfs. Hot damn. Yep. Cool. All right. Well, that works for FreeBSD 14. So I'll have to check for I'll have to check for 13. Oh, that's not what I want to do. Time is it? 6:07. Clang. Generic Linux. Well, I'll just wait. What did the script have? Git gmake gcc autoconf. Okay, I can probably get rid of autoconf, automake libtool, and get text utils. I think this is when I was building libc when I was building a libfuse straight up. Gotta figure out dinner. But I think this was for the old days when I still was building libfuse straight up rather than incorporating it into my build where I moved a lot of these dependencies. So I can fix this, but I'm gonna have to do this later. What time is it? Yeah, I gotta run so I can make dinner before 7 o'clock when gaming commences, and I help the family save the super Earth, make it safe for democracy. So anyway, thank you everyone who joined in. Yes, Wind Up Boy, 3DO. I do have some more 3DO stuff I want to get back to in the not too distant future, but I've been did enough 3DO for a while. I wanted to get back to mergerfs, and for some reason, it's interesting. Things come in waves where like all of a sudden someone will write an article, and unsurprisingly then there'll be a bunch of attention that I get and like bug reports and stuff. But for that hasn't happened. Like there hasn't been any new news or anything on mergerfs in some time, but I think I'm up to over 44. Let's see. I've got like something like 400 new stars in the past like couple months. Yeah, I'm at 4,431. And like I think I hit 4,000 sometime last year, so there's quite a few that have come in very recently, and yeah. So I don't know what the reasoning is, but certainly new attention. So I might as well put in some more attention myself on the product. But again, thanks everyone, and I'm gonna try to be streaming more in the new year. And if there's any suggestions on things that I work on that you might be interested in seeing, I know I've gotten some requests to work on my emulator, the 3DO emulator, because of some bugs in there. I'm open to suggestions, especially you're not always interested in working on the same thing all the time. So, but if you're not subscribed following, if you're not following on Twitch, please consider doing so, and have a good night. Or morning or afternoon, wherever you are, and I will see you next time. Be good. Have a good week.
One of the hottest new CD applications here at CES was 3DO, the acronym for three-dimensional optics. Trip Hawkins, who founded Electronic Arts, has put together an alliance between his own company and consumer electronics giant Mitsushita, communications giant AT&T, and the world's largest vendor of entertainment software, Time Warner. The result is a new standard for interactive multimedia.
We really look forward to the final emergence of what I've talked about for a long time, which is the new Hollywood, the merging of Silicon Valley and traditional Hollywood, which you see represented on stage here today.
With our filmmakers and television producers, and in fact people and talent in the music business, we find it possible for us to tell our stories, to develop our drama, to develop our characters, because of the graphics power it's not just the numbers, and it's not just all of these boxes and what they contain. It really represents a very meaningful watershed for an entire software industry, and that is the software industry in Hollywood.
When we saw potential of technology at 3DO, we are very encouraged to make a significant investment in 3DO.
3DO can process images 50 times faster than a PC or a video game console, thanks to custom animation processors which run in parallel. The system can process up to 64 million pixels per second. In addition to the graphics chips, the 3DO system also includes a custom digital processor for audio, a specialized video processor, and a 32-bit RISC processor for program control. The system also uses a double-speed CD-ROM drive for fast access. The net result is a lot of computing power that gives you smoother images, cleaner scaling, and texture mapping. 3DO calls it cinematic software.
You'll see a new kind of interactivity. For example, there'll be movies that are done as a linear stream just like they are now. It's a storyline that has a set beginning and a set end. But now you'll begin to see what are called interactive pictures. These are stories where the storyline can change, or the perspective on how you view that particular story can change. And it'll be a new form of media. Just like in the beginning of motion picture, all they were doing was filming a stage play. It wasn't until later they began to understand how to use the medium of film. This is a new medium, and it'll take a couple years before